Just waking up in the morning, gotta thank God. I don't know, but today seems kind of odd. No barking from the dog, no smog, and Jamie cooked the breakfast full of hog. Welcome, everybody. And today, Richard is going to join us, and of course, I will give him the floor for as long as he would like to speak, and we'll have a civil, hopefully, flowing conversation. Richard, do you want to tell everybody who you are and where you publish your materials, or whatever kind of introduction you want to give?
Yeah, hi Jay.
Hey.
Yeah, thanks for finally actually get to talk to each other. I don't really know how to follow that. I can't rap. I'm part Italian.
There's a couple Italian rappers, aren't there?
I guess so. That's probably as colourful as I get. Okay, who am I? What do I do? So I guess I've been writing for different right-wing publications since about 2015, I want to say. Mostly, back then I was writing about libertarianism, and there was the alt-right pipeline and that sort of thing. So now eventually I put together a book that was published by Arctos. You'll probably be a bit familiar with them, Jay, I think.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them.
And so my attempt there was basically just to steer lots of guys away from paganism towards Christianity of some sort. I'm a Catholic. And also, just to get the libertarians to stop being libertarian.
Well, we're on common ground there. I agree with that.
Yeah, so I saw the other day some things you were posting. I was in hearty agreement with you there. That was my background there. I've been involved in a few debates where I'm talking. Mostly it's with pagans.
Yeah.
So the pagan guy, or you're probably familiar with this guy, Jason Reza Giorgiani.
Oh yeah, I think that guy's a lunatic.
He doesn't like me. I wanted to be kind of civil and nice towards him. I think his views. It's kind of just like a rehashed Satanism, if you like.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Which is basically just a religious form of libertarianism. That's kind of how I got into talking about it, because it's like, this is just libertarianism. This is just individualism and egoism again. And so, I wrote something, and he just totally blew up. He wrote like this 7,000 word hate essay on me.
Wow.
I kept the receipts. I still got it. The website shut down, but I still got it. It's pretty crazy. So I just end up in conversations with people like that. I'm really just a normal guy. I'm just a writer. My knowledge of Christian history is, I don't think anywhere near yours at all. But we were talking recently. I was talking about me as a Catholic. How can I have certainty about Catholic dogma?
Before we go into that, can I ask you, were you raised Catholic, or did you convert?
I grew up in a very nominal Catholic house. So my gran, as I said before, my gran was Italian. I was baptized. I don't think there was any effort really to confirm me. My cousins, my godparents, but they don't even talk to me really anymore. Pretty much just because I became a Christian, and when I was in my teenage years, I suppose maybe around 19. I had been interested in religion. I was reading different religious texts, and I read the New Testament. I guess I was just a Protestant pretty much for a few years. I became a very serious Calvinist
Well, we have common ground. I did the same thing.
Yeah. So I understand. I seem to remember seeing something about that about you. Must have been a couple of years ago or something. I think a lot of people took that path. I mean, I think if you look at a lot of YouTubers like Catholic or Orthodox, like Christian influencers, but they seem to have been Calvinist for some time. I don't know what that is. I don't know why that kind of happened that way. I think maybe there was a lot of disillusionment with traditional Christianity. I think people were trying to return to tradition, quote unquote, and so they were falling back into Christianity, but then they were actually quite intelligent guys, so they became serious about doctrine. And Calvinism, it has its consistencies internally, and so I kind of think that's what that was about. But same kind of thing with libertarianism, I guess. That's not really a thing anymore. I think everyone's moved on from that.
Right.
But in terms of orthodoxy, I'm going to have to, admit my ignorance a little bit here, which is a bit of a shame because, I've had lots of Orthodox friends. I've kind of written alongside Orthodox guys. I have had theological discussions like with Orthodox friends and things like that. My knowledge is kind of poor, though, I would say. I've tried to look into things like the energy essences distinction, Palamas, things like that. It's fascinating, but I think a lot of people would agree with me in saying I just don't have the time to do like a deep dive on stuff like that. Generally, though, my feelings about orthodoxy are very, very positive. I suppose I kind of agree with, I don't want to diverge too much here, I kind of agree with the thought of, there's a geopolitical thinker called Igor Panarin. He's like the dean of some foreign policy college in Russia, and he's known for making these big like geopolitical predictions about the future, and he would kind of divide up Europe and the West, let's say, into two. He says really what you've got is kind of like the Anglo world, which he calls the Judeo-Protestant world. Which I think,
that's funny.
Some people would think, oh, well, that's really accurate. On the other side, he says you've got the Orthodox-Catholic thought, which he sees as being distinct from like the liberal West, if you like. And he's had quite an influence in Russia, but I kind of think that there's a lot of truth to that, and so just generally, I kind of have very positive feelings about orthodoxy, in maybe like a naive way. I'd love to see greater efforts towards reunification. Whether anything like that would be possible, I don't know, but I just feel positively about it. So that's kind of like an introduction to me, like what I know about orthodoxy, albeit very little. What I know about you, which is probably quite little. I remember seeing some videos of yours a while back about the Illuminati and Hollywood and things like that, and I was thought, wow, this guy's really smart, and it's really fascinating, and I can see like you've got a huge following, and it seems to be like a really entertaining guy. So
well, thank you, I appreciate that. So in the DMs we were talking about this issue of knowing dogma, and you said you'd like to chat on that. So I'll just lay out the premise of what we were discussing, and then I'll let you have the floor again. So basically, I was saying that, and this is an issue I brought up with multiple Catholics in the past few days, which is just, to me, it looks like if we were going to be in a church where it was going to provide the thing that is one of the top selling points, this idea that you're going to have certitude, you're going to get clarity, you're going to get finality to certain matters, and that's going to be through the office of the Supreme Teacher, the Supreme Pontiff, the Pope, etc. And the way that you do this. Where what I'm looking for is the dogma. The dogma is classified in basically three categories of extraordinary magisterium, universal ordinary magisterium, the first two of which are promised to be guided by the Petrine charism of infallibility. And by extension, I think this means that the Pope is indefectible, meaning that he's not going to officially teach error for the whole church. He might privately hold an erroneous opinion or something like that. So we all agree we're not talking about his private opinions, but rather his public teachings and what he exemplifies in his actions as well. For example, he couldn't, sacrifice infants and hail Satan and still be a Christian, right? That would be an action of apostasy, as I understand Roman Catholic law defines it, and so forth. And so the third category would be the ordinary teaching, which, although is not necessarily infallible, my understanding is that a Catholic has to submit to it, quote, with docility. So you've got these three criteria, but my question, as we were discussing with Richard and I in DMs, my question becomes, I don't see how really the selling point is there if I'm not really in a better position than, say, a Protestant has only about this many thousand pages, we'll say about 3,000 or 4,000 pages to work through to derive dogma, so to speak, from. But a Roman Catholic has much more work to do because you've actually got about, we'll say, 10,000 pages if we include Denzinger, the papal encyclicals, the ecumenical councils, the Bible. If we total all that up, that's probably going to be, I'm going to guess, maybe 7,000 to 10,000 pages. I'm just wondering, like, how would I be in any better position than a Protestant? Because this is, again, the selling point that is often used by, I would say, most of the pop Roman Catholic apologists, that we have the magisterium. You don't have that in the Orthodox world. And so this is sort of a trump card. But my point is just this. If I've only got 3 broad criteria and I have this giant stack of stuff that I'm bound to, the 3 broad criteria really don't do much. They just kind of leave me in this sort of like, oh, okay, so I guess I better get to work. Now you might say, well, but that's not really practical. You've got the catechism, you've got this, you've got that. Yeah, but I'm not just bound by the catechism. I'm bound by the entire, quote, magisterium. So my point is that what appears at first to kind of be a simple trump card, right, against the Protestant or even the Orthodox, well, we've got the magisterium, we've got the Pope, we've got the simple answers, the solution. You guys are missing that, so you're missing a fundamental component that Jesus would surely provide to his church. And what I'm saying is that, well, if we actually look at this fundamental component, and I'm speaking myself from having been in the Roman Catholic traditional world for many years back in my 20s, I don't actually think that this delivers on this promise at all. I think it's actually much worse, especially when we look at the controversies post-Vatican II. So that's sort of the topic that we laid out, and I'll let you say whatever you'd like.
Yeah, I was talking about a Protestant with this the other day. They posted, and I mean, quite sort of, I don't know what they were trying to do with the post, maybe sort of like to spur other Protestants into action or something like that. But it was some quote from John MacArthur or something like that, and he was saying, like every single individual Christian is responsible for. I don't know what kind of doctrine it was, but basically just for determining different doctrines, and I mean I think that's exactly right. If you take a Protestant, which I think is a spiritually individualistic belief, if you take that view, then every individual is totally responsible for all that sort of thing. I mean, the problem I have with that is that that's just not how humans work. So, like, humans are, not just social animals. We're corporate animals. When we come into groups, those groups really do take on a life of their own. Not to be like that guy, like the empiricist sort of guy, but there's a lot of data showing this, and also as Christians, we shouldn't have a problem really believing that. Like we look at the church and we think, okay, this is a corporate thing. We come together, we are the body of Christ. Now, I mean, 80% of people, at least, are incapable of having original thought. They're not thought leaders. We have that expression, thought leaders, because we need people to lead us in thinking. A lot of people will just get their understanding of what is going on around them from the news. I know some people here in England, and you would have thought that a long time ago, people would have thought, we cannot trust the BBC for anything. Like, globally, people should understand this, and yet, I still encounter people who it doesn't really seem as though something is real to them unless it has been said on the BBC News. So that's kind of what we're dealing with. Now, when I look at the church, I think of it as, it must necessarily be a corporate thing. It's got to have the thought leaders and all the rest of it. And, to come to the point that you were raising there about how can you have the certainty, I think that the certainty really comes just from being a part of the church. I wouldn't say that necessarily... in the DMs we were talking before and saying, does there need to be like one specific list which is listing out and defining what has been infallibly taught? What specifically is the ordinary teaching, what specifically is the extraordinary teaching, and all of that. And I don't think that that's the... I don't think that is necessarily what's missing or what's needed. I think what the Protestants are missing is that they are individualists, and so really John MacArthur is right for them. They are on their own, and they have to determine all the doctrine, absolutely everything for themselves to get it all right. They need to read everything through. I don't think that an individual Catholic, and I know some of them, and bless them, but they are just not smart enough to read and to grapple with and to get to grips with most of the magisterial teaching.
Well, let me ask it this way: do you think that the Roman Catholic papal magisterium does provide certainty for doctrines and dogma?
I do, yeah. I can speak for myself, and I can say that I feel that there is certainty. I suppose in the DMs I said something that would maybe help me understand your position a bit better would be if you could give me an example of something where you think, I should have some ambiguity, and maybe there's some.
Yeah, I can think of an example like the giving of communion to people who have been divorced. That was a notorious change that Francis allowed some years, I think 8 years ago. Or another example would be the alteration in the death penalty, which, if you go back to say the time of the Council of Trent, the death penalty was considered part of natural justice. But by the time of Francis's argument, now John Paul II had already said he thought it was wrong and it shouldn't be there. And I think he made an alteration to the catechism, but specifically Francis has said, no, it's actually contrary to the gospel. So if it's contrary to the gospel, how could it have been a natural justice at the time of Trent?
Yeah. That's a tricky one, isn't it? Definitely the capital punishment one. As far as I can figure out, the debate is between those who are trying to uphold human dignity and those who are trying to uphold certain aspects of what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, do you admit that it was the normal practice, say at the time of Trent and before?
Yeah, of course, certainly. And I also see that there are some Catholics, and they're desperately trying to find some statement, and they do find some statements that are from. I can't remember that there was some pope, and there was some statement, and someone shared this I found it. Some pope in the past saying that they thought that capital punishment was technically contrary to human dignity. But okay, but for something like this, I think, okay, so some debate has come up, okay, and let's say we're living in a different time or whatever, and so maybe for certain reasons you're thinking, okay, what are we going to do with this? Well, I don't see that there's as much of a problem with hashing it out and then saying, for instance, I mean, the way I read it is just that, okay, maybe there are some times, where maybe there are certain demographics and, there's a certain time period where we can say, okay, within a polity, it's right for them to be upholding human dignity.
Well, if that's the case, though, it wouldn't be a natural principle, right? Because if it's a principle of natural justice, for example, and I'm looking for the papal statement where at the time, right around the time of Trent, you had one of the popes not just believing in the death penalty, but it actually says homosexual priests should be put to death.
Oh, right. I mean, maybe Francis would agree with that. I don't know. He's a bit sort of back and forth on his.
Now hold on. Now he allowed the blessings of the couples, not the union, the couples, which was clearly not because the CDF in 2003, I believe, had issued a document saying that you can't bless the couples.
Well, I mean, I'm happy to talk about that one, but I mean, with regard to the death penalty, like I do think that there is a consistent view where you can say, yes, in times past, you can find statements in Christian history to say, like, ideally, we wouldn't have something like capital punishment, but capital punishment is a necessity.
But what I'm saying is, like, if I found the quote here, it's the Apostolic Constitution of what you consider Pope St. Pius V of Trent, in his Apostolic Constitution calls for the death penalty for homosexual priests. So I'm wondering, how do we get from that to not only a large portion of the Novus Ordo Catholic priests being Skittles, but actually the blessing of those quote couples? Is that to me, this is just like a rank, flat out contradiction.
Well, I mean, that probably have something more to do with the Vatican itself, now having its own, like, technically, like, political authority there. So it might more be a case of, like, this is human law as it's supposed to be applied within, like, canon law, let's say, that aspect of canon law. So it's kind of politically within the church how they're handling that situation.
Well, but I thought I thought it was supposed to be clear, right? Like, I thought the magisterium would make these issues of faith and morals clear. And my point is that it doesn't seem to be making. I mean, it was very clear for centuries what the Catholic Church is teaching on the death penalty was, right? Why is it no longer clear?
Well, I mean, I think we're living in a time basically where we've got liberal hegemony around the world, and so anything that whiffs of eugenics or anything that whiffs of the slightest disrespect to human dignity is repugnant. And so I think that is probably what's brought this question to light. And so that's probably what has empowered the thinking of certain people. Francis, of course, like, he's notorious for wanting to rethink stuff in light of the latter half of the 20th century. Yeah. Like war, and nuclear weapons and things like that. That's that's
well, and another example I could use of this is, if you go back to the ancient canons, and the canons of Carthage, for example, are accepted at the Sixth Trullo and the Sixth Council, and they note, for example, that if a priest goes in and prays with schismatics, heretics, or at a synagogue, and by extension a mosque as well, that canon was before the existence of Islam, but it would apply to Islam as well, because Muslims are obviously anti-Trinitarian. And you had mentioned that you find those things to be a bit scandalous as well. How can we get from it's an excommunicatable offense for a cleric to pray in a mosque or in a synagogue to calling crusades, Urban II calling crusades? You've got Pope Calixtus saying that it's the abominable sect of Muhammad, etc. And then the logic of Nostra Aetate and Lumen Gentium 16 is the very basis for why Francis goes and prays in a mosque towards Mecca, or Benedict goes and prays in a mosque towards Mecca. And I'm not just bringing that up to harp on just that, but you were asking for examples of things where, well, what are some examples of things that aren't clear? Well, it was very clear for many, many century millennia, East and West, you can't go do these kinds of things as a Christian. They're fundamentally immoral actions as a Christian. So my point is that if we read Mortalium Animos, the encyclical of Pius XI, it clearly says that these types of things, all interfaith gatherings, he says, are premised on indifferentism and are ultimately apostasy.
Well, I mean, I would say, I think the teaching of the church is still clear, where you have, like these political statements, because I kind of see them as being like political statements.
So what you're saying, Lumen Gentium and Nostra Aetate are political? I mean, they're saying that Muslims and Christians worship the same God.
Sorry, I mean where they go into, where you had what was the article? It said like Pope Benedict the 16th, wasn't it? And these Orthodox guys, and they were going to this mosque. I think it was Sola, I can't remember his name in full.
Well, let me give an example. Mortalium Animos, paragraph 10 says that the Apostolic See has never.
Yeah, but you see, I reckon that they would just, they find like some kind of loophole about it. So, I think in the instance you were talking about there, like someone else had said, oh, well, actually in that place, there's, supposed to be, according to tradition, John the Baptist's head is there. And so, okay, well, there's like a kind of loophole, and I think they did something similarly, didn't they?
Who has a loophole?
Assisi.
I'm not following you in terms of the loophole. I mean, yeah, I'm aware of Assisi and Assisi too, but what do you mean?
Yes,
what do you mean a loophole?
Well, I mean, the loophole there would be, in Assisi they had some people there, but like the Buddhists or whoever it was, they would go off to somewhere else and they would do their prayers separately. And so
okay, but Benedict is what's the loophole? Where's the loophole in Benedict praying together with the Grand Imam towards Mecca in the mosque? How's there a loophole there?
Well, I think the reason Benedict and some Catholics, and from what I could see of what was written on, I haven't looked into it, but there was some Orthodox there as well. I think that they were sort of doing their own prayer, and it was something, because John the Baptist's head was there, and so, they were kind of being allowed into the mosque
well,
to do something,
is that,
but it was not,
okay.
Like the Muslim call to prayer and that sort of
thing.
So they would do something like that, I think.
How is that but how is it a loophole, though, if Mortalium Animos, for example, which is expressing the traditional teaching, says that you can't even participate in those assemblies at all?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I think the Catholic position on those things is clear. And, the reason I think it's clear is because when they do these, quite bizarre things, some people would think that they are, wonderful and it's great and all of that. People say, oh, wow, how strange, you've got the Pope going and doing this. Isn't that, so everyone, Catholics.
Well, you're saying that, right. By the way, I agree that it's wrong for the Orthodox as well. But do you believe that the basis for this, for example, of the Abu Dhabi Faith Center where the idea is that Muslims, Christians, and Jews all have the same faith. Don't you think that this is premised on what Lumen Gentium 16 says, that Muslims and Jews are together of the faith of Abraham and they worship the same God?
So, I mean, I think that Muslims and Jews, according to that statement, are in their intent trying to worship what we would understand to be God the Father.
Yeah, but the intention is not right. But intention was not what was the deciding factor in the thing that you admitted is the traditional teaching. So even though there might be individual Muslims that have a correct intention, public liturgical worship cannot be done in this way according to Mortalium Animos, expressing, as you said, the traditional teaching, because it gives the impression of indifferentism. In other words, it's a public action of faith that expresses that all of these are the same. So even if there were a loophole that secretly Benedict was praying privately to himself, the action itself is still a public action of apostasy.
Well, this is what I'm saying. So I'm saying, like, you know, the question is, like, is there clarity in the teaching about these things? I think that there is clarity in the teaching of these things, and
then you would have to
do these weird things.
Then you would have to condemn those actions as apostasy if the teaching is clear, correct? Wouldn't Benedict? Wouldn't Benedict and John Paul's actions fall under the condemnation of Mortalium Animos and the ancient canons if the teaching is clear?
Well, when you look into what they are doing, they are always trying to find some kind of loophole just so that they can get together with people of another religion.
But doesn't that express
something that isn't quite like?
Isn't that Talmudic though? I mean, Talmudic? Isn't that the Talmudic approach that Jesus condemns? Let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. I mean, let me ask it this way: Did the martyrs of the first 3 centuries, did they find a loophole to where they could offer incense secretly to Yahweh while they're offering it to Caesar?
Well, no. I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily. Like another one of the examples, for instance, was I think you showed something, and there was Francis, and he was praying with or next to, or however you would want to say it, some Buddhists, and they were doing like a chant or something. I mean, he was praying simultaneously. I don't know the instance, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but for example, just looking at something like that, my point is that someone would say, I didn't think that Catholics were supposed to be doing that, and that's what causes the scandal. That's why it appears to be scandalous.
But you're saying
now,
that
what they then say afterwards is, or the way they've set it up, and within the context, they say, these Buddhists, they were simply doing a chant, or you could say, a proper understanding of Buddhism is that it doesn't quite fit the criteria of a religion in the sense that we would understand it. So this is why you get
but Buddhism, right? But
and stuff
hold on,
like that.
But Buddhism, just like the way Pope Calixtus spoke of Islam and Pope Eugene spoke of Islam, he calls them horrible demonic faiths, and Buddhism is demonic as well. Whether they recognize the personal deity or not is really irrelevant to whether the philosophy is one that is demonic, and it absolutely is. We know from Scripture, multiple places, Psalm 106, the gods of the nations are devils. Psalm 95, Paul in 1 Corinthians 10:20, the gods of the nations are devils. So it's a demonic religion, even if the individual people are not inherently evil. We agree on that. But again, the purpose of the famous encyclical Mortalium Animos of 1928, which is ironic because this is only a few decades before the opening of the doors of Vatican II to all of this stuff, it's clearly condemned that and he's just talking about ecumenist projects with Christians. Mortalium Animos isn't even conceiving of doing these kinds of prayer meetings and religious celebrations that are with other
Sure.
religions.
Yeah.
This is just talking about Protestants and Anglicans and even Orthodox. And it says that it has never been allowed because it gives the impression of indifferentism. And it's just like when Aquinas gives examples of what would be sins of apostasy. One of the examples he gives in the Summa is if a Catholic were to go and revere the tomb of Muhammad, he says that would be an action of apostasy. And in Catholic canon law, to do those kinds of actions, it means that you're severed from the body of Christ. It means you're no longer a Catholic. It's the same penalty in Catholic canon law for when a person procures an abortion. If you get an abortion, you're late sententiae, immediately ipso facto excommunicated, and you're supposed to have the bishop forgive the sin for you to come back into communion. Now, most Roman Catholics don't enforce that, but the point is just simply that certain sins in Catholicism are considered immediate excommunications by the virtue of the action itself, and one of those is also apostasy.
Sure. I mean, I don't think any popes have revered the tomb of Muhammad or anything like that.
Oh, so wait. So praying towards Mecca is not the equivalent?
So, I mean, in that particular instance, which I haven't looked into, someone else also sent something along, and they said, okay, in this place, technically there's a relic of John the Baptist, and so, for me, okay, I don't know the ins and outs.
Well, I mean, I could if I'm a martyr in the 1st century, 2nd century, couldn't I say that? Well, if I face in that direction, at least 20,000 miles in that direction, there's going to be at least some relic. So I'm not actually honoring the image of Caesar, and so you don't have to martyr me because secretly I'm actually reverencing, a saint's relic that's 500 miles in that direction. I mean, in other words, this is like Talmudic sophistry.
I mean, my point is that, we were talking before about, can I have some clarity in what the church teaching is?
Well, so, and you admitted.
I can have some clarity.
Right, and the clarity is that...
What popes will do is to, they because there is clarity about those things, I think this is why they then, have to... use these sort of political techniques, and they sort of say, well, maybe if we do an event that's a bit like this, and
but just to call them political is missing the fact that they're religious syncretist events. That's the point. I mean,
sure. I don't mean to, I don't mean to like hand wave away like any, the spiritual reality of these things, or the importance of these matters, like especially like for their individual souls. I'm not trying to dismiss that. Don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say there. I'm more saying that, like.
But aren't these the people that provide the clarity?
They might have good intentions about these things, whereas actually what they're doing is kind of being scandalous and all the rest of it, and they are trying to work around this stuff. But
see, we can never know their intentions, and that's why what we go by is the public actions. I can never know or judge anybody's interior state. Only they know those things, right? And God. So what we know and what we go by in the public sphere is what's called the public action, right? And that's why public actions like this tell me that anybody who has a love for Christ could never go into a situation of praying with and honoring the religion dedicated to Antichrist. I mean, John says if you don't confess Christ come in the flesh, you're of Antichrist. And Islam is like the greatest version of that, with 1 billion people pushing this. So it's unconscionable to me that you could think, not you, but I'm saying that Benedict could think, well, he's a Christian, but it's okay to do these actions. Now, even if he's sinning and he's, secretly had an intention to pray or whatever, let's grant that. The point is that how is the papacy providing the clarity when for the last 70 years, this is the type of stuff that's been promoted, because it's promoted in the Vatican II documents in Lumen Gentium 16 and Nostra Aetate, where it says, for example, Hindus also seek God in love like Catholics do. And if you ask many Catholic priests, like, do you think a Hindu and a Catholic worship the same God? They'll say, yeah, we all believe in God. However, they've got it kind of muddled up with certain things. So the point is that it's the natural theology, lowest common denominator stuff that is the basis for these actions of the, Assisi gatherings and whatnot. And that's premised on what's in the Vatican II documents. So if it's in the Vatican II documents, it's not just a question of the political or geopolitical influences of the papacy, which I agree with, that they push this stuff for, political reasons. But there's also a more fundamental element that they're pushing it for political reasons because it's actually in the dogmas and the documents of Vatican II. And if that's the case, and I agree even that Vatican II had a geopolitical agenda behind it, you can read Wim Hof's book on that, then what that means is that Vatican II and Vatican I contradict each other.
I've heard the arguments about does Vatican II contradict Vatican I, and other people saying, well, it doesn't. Ultimately, I just think some of it was not very well written.
So it's ambiguous, but I thought you were saying the papacy's magisterium gives certitude and clarity.
I mean, the point is, like, it's not necessarily saying anything new. Where it's covering old ground, it's maybe not doing so particularly well. It's like omitting things, but that's not to say that that stuff wasn't already.
Well, what about the statements on Jews, for example? What about the statements on Jews, for example? Because Vatican II says that the Jews are the elder brothers in the faith, and that they have a valid reading of the Old Testament, etc. Is that the traditional Catholic teaching?
I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that, what it says. But, as far as I understand, like the historical Catholic understanding of the Jews is that, since the coming of the Messiah, they have gone astray. That doesn't mean that.
Are they also of the faith of Abraham? Vatican II says that they're of the faith of Abraham, like the Muslims.
Well, yeah, they believe in Abraham. And
No. Atheists believe in Abraham, so that doesn't make you of the faith of Abraham. What is the script? Hold on.
Atheists I know don't even think Abraham was a real guy.
Well, plenty of them do, though, is my point, right? So many people believe in the existence of Abraham. That doesn't make you of the faith of Abraham.
Yeah.
So you don't think that being Trinitarian is what makes you? Because Galatians says the only way to be in Abraham's faith is through Christ.
Yeah, so we're only really children of Abraham.
Okay, so then they're not of the faith of Abraham. There's no Unitarian God that Muslims, Christians, and Jews worship. It's the Trinity. That's the point.
Yeah, I think the intent is to say, and I believe this has always been the view of Muslims and Jews specifically, perhaps distinguished from some other groups like Hindus and that sort of thing, is that they believe that they are following in the footsteps of Abraham.
So all I have to do is, so I can believe whatever I want, and I'm of the faith of Abraham. Does Paul say that in Galatians? Paul says that the only way to be of the faith of Abraham and to be in the covenant is in Christ. So, but if I don't care about Christ and the Trinity, if I think that I'm of the faith of Abraham, then it is?
No, sure. No, not like that. It's like, so they sincerely, in the same way that, Paul talking about the Gentiles is saying, they're reaching out, in the dark.
And he says they don't know God.
Yes, they don't really, because God, as we understand, is revealed in Jesus Christ.
That's the only God. That's why. Yeah, but see, now do you see why? Now do you see why the Trinity in the Old Testament is such a key element? Because it's not a new revelation at the time of Christ. It means that Abraham believed in the Trinity.
But you see, the point is that if you have, contrary to, let's say, Hindus. Hindus, might have zero views about Abraham. Jews and Muslims, what makes them distinct, and I think that's pretty much all the document is. Well,
are you aware that Nostra Aetate includes Hindus as worshippers of the same God as well?
Well, yeah, I think it's like. I know.
Well, you just said exclude Hindus,
and they believe in God. They believe in the God of Plato, and so much of the stuff that
so all of the right, but none of that is the Trinity. So it's not the same reference.
No, well,
So they don't believe in our God. That's the point.
Not to be pedantic, but like, there are some Platonists and like they believe like, oh, okay, the Trinity in Christianity does make sense because
but none of that is but that's an abstracted idea of God, and what I'm saying is that
yes, exactly, correct.
But that's not knowing or worshiping God, because the texts actually say that they seek God and adore Him in love and trust. So it's a capital G there. So do you think that Basil thought that, for example, Eunomius worshiped the same God as him, the radical Arian?
Sorry, say again. I missed that last bit.
Do you think that Saint Basil thought that the radical Arian opponent, Eunomius, do you think that he thought that Basil think that Eunomius worshiped the same God as Basil?
No, I mean, but he could probably say something. He could probably say something like, "You think that you know God. You think that you love God."
That's my point, and that they don't, and that's contrary to what you just said.
No,
you just said if they think it and they intend it to be sincere, then they do. You said that's what makes you of the faith of Abraham.
I'm saying that is what their faith is. It's wrong because
it's not faith in Trinity,
relationship with Christ. If they don't personally know Jesus, the person, Jesus Christ, and who He is, and if they are not.
Here's the point: there is no lowest common denominator thing called God that we all worship, and then we tack on Trinity. The only God is the Trinity. There is no other option. Let me ask it this way: when Jesus is talking to the Pharisees,
most humans believe in a creator, though.
It doesn't matter. It's still there. That's an idea.
I'm not saying that they're saved. I'm not saying that.
Well, I mean, Nostra Aetate is but it doesn't. No, situation. The point is that they're not worshiping the Trinity, and that's the only God. So let's bring this home to a very clear example in the book of John. When Jesus is arguing with the Pharisees who don't believe that He is the path to God, does Jesus say, "But you still worship the true God"? Or does He say that you don't even know the true God at all? What does He say about the Pharisees and the Father?
I'm struggling to think of a statement, but...
So John 5 to 9, all of John 5 to 9, particularly John 8, they have this discourse and this debate, and He says, "You do not know the Father, you've neither seen Him nor known Him, you're the seed of the devil." So they're Unitarians in the exact same sense as Muslims and some of these other Unitarians. So do they count as worshipers of the true God?
Well, I mean, I think that, even though, He says they're in the seat of Moses, I think there were high priests doing stuff.
No.
I don't think
that's not what we're not asking. That's a deflection. That's a deflection. Do the Pharisees who reject the Son, do they know or worship the Father according to Jesus? He explicitly says they do not.
No, I mean, Jesus is quite clear that, in fact, because of their faults, their faulty understanding, their sin, and all the rest of it, they are in fact children of the devil, is what He calls them.
But He explicitly says you neither know that
God at all.
He says you don't know the Father or the Son.
Yes.
He specifically says you do not know the Father.
Yes, if they don't know them. They on the other hand think that they do.
Does that matter? Is that acceptable to God at all? The fact that they think they know God? It's irrelevant.
It only matters to the extent that you can then start to have an open in order to be able to talk with these people.
No, you don't. Though that's all premised. That's all premised on natural theology.
Well, I mean, if you're having a discussion with a Muslim person, and then religion comes up as a topic, a good place to start, as with any discussion where you think you are going to have some disagreements with someone, is where you agree with.
Yeah, but I don't start by saying that, well, we both agree on the same God. Now let's see about the person of Jesus, because they don't have the same God. You understand that Muslims, for example, most Muslims that you argue with, they actually remove multiple attributes. Like they don't believe in divine omnipresence. They don't believe in divine immanence.
I would say that they have a faulty understanding of God, yes. And in that sense, they can't know God personally in the way that we can, knowing Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but that's the only way to know God. And the point is that the Vatican II documents, the Vatican II documents go beyond abstract knowledge of a thing and say that they actually love him and worship him and adore him. Adoration is an action of worship, and that suggests that God accepts that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there were times in the Old Testament where people thought that, everything was hunky-dory and they were okay and they had a great relationship with God and everything was fine and everything's going to be okay. And it turned out to not be correct.
That's a false analogy to what we're talking about. We're talking about what the documents explicitly say about the adoration of the Muslims themselves towards, or the Hindus.
They love their idea of God. And if you ask them...
But that's not God.
What God are we talking
about? Do you understand that between Roman Catholics and Orthodox, this is a key point of departure, is that we're not worshiping an idea of God or an abstracted thing.
We are not, no.
That's
we know God personally.
It says, look, they do, but my point is that they do not adore the one God any more than the Pharisees adored the one God. And they're not of the faith of Abraham any more than the Pharisees are the faith of Abraham, according to Jesus and Paul. And it doesn't matter what they thought about their faith. That's irrelevant to whether it matches up, because Jesus says, you don't know him. It's not, what you're doing isn't working. So you gotta reorient your paradigm to where it begins with me, Jesus is saying to them, right? And they're like, we're not going to do that. We're going to stick with Moses, and we know God. We know the Father. And Jesus says, you neither know him nor have you ever seen him. That's what you should be saying to the Muslims and the Jews, not what Vatican II says, that the church esteems the Muslims because they adore the one God, merciful, subsisting in himself, the creator of heaven and earth, and they take pains to submit to his inscrutable decrees, just like Abraham. That's Vatican II. No, Muslims do not submit to God's decrees like Abraham, because Abraham worshiped the Trinity, and Abraham believed in Jesus, according to Jesus in John 5. Abraham rejoiced, or 5 through 9. Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and so I was glad. It's John 8.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the distinction is that I would see what the limited, very positive statements that are included in some of those Vatican II, or what do they call them? Those documents, I think they're were they declarations? I can't remember the term that they give to them. But in those,
how are they very limited? I mean, it's in Nostra Aetate and Lumen, gentium.
It's just these limited, very positive statements about.
Oh, so hold on.
Okay. Here are the big world religions.
So now we're at a key. Right, here's the thing. We're at a key point of our original topic, which was clarity through magisterium. And when we go to these magisterial documents, which you said are there to provide this clarity and this certitude, now actually many of these parts you're saying are unclear. So how do I know when I'm reading these documents whether I'm getting
they're clear? It's just that they're not.
They're clear.
You just said
this section. You just said this section is not clear. What do you mean they're clear?
If I said they're not clear, that's not what I meant, Sam. I said they're limited and they're very positive. They're only including.
Earlier in the discussion, you said there's some ambiguity in these documents.
Well, only in the sense that if you were just reading that one document and you weren't looking at Catholicism as a whole.
Oh, so wait a minute. I thought the documents were there to provide the clarity, and now I have to know the whole totality of the documents. That's why I brought up the 10,000 pages issue.
Well, I mean, I think if you speak to most Catholics, they wouldn't have read these documents at all.
Well, all that tells me is that they don't know their own position. So,
I think they do. Like,
well, you said earlier. You said at the beginning of the conversation. No.
Francis with some Buddhists.
You said at the beginning. You said at the beginning of the conversation. That contradicts your statement at the beginning of the conversation that most Catholics don't know the dogmas.
No, they do. It's just like a part, in the DMs we were talking about, like.
Well, did you not say that most of them don't know this stuff? You said that at the beginning.
Yeah, most people do not have original thoughts.
No, you said most Catholics are not very smart.
So they have to be a part of the church.
No, you said most Catholics are not very smart on these topics, and they don't know this stuff.
Yeah, so that's when they need to be a part of a whole church, of a whole
history. Okay, but that contradicts the claim that you just made.
That they're included in.
That contradicts the claim that you just made, that most Catholics do know their faith.
Yeah, because like you get catechized and you're talking about stuff with people, and you see in the paper, oh look, there's a picture of Pope Francis, and he's with, you know, he's wearing like some Native American headgear or something. What's that about? You know, and so then you start talking about it with people. You know, is this priest saying this thing? I mean, your bishop says something and stuff like that. And, you know, so it's a very personal thing. It's like, is that when you're a part of a family? You know, I was saying, like, you know...
Okay, yeah.
It's like you're part of a family. You know, the rules, the household rules, are not necessarily all written up on the wall.
All right.
But people know the rules.
Well,
they know what goes on
I mean, I
house,
think...
how things work. You're enculturated into it. You're enculturated.
Okay. But I don't see... And I understand what you're saying, that it's a holistic kind of a collective experience. And I believe that as Orthodox as well. Yes. But... I don't see how that answers a lot of the questions that I brought up about ambiguity. I mean, we can leave that to the audience. Do you care if I move on to a different topic or a different question? We don't have to keep going. If you want to, if you need to go, you can go. If you want to stay, you can stay.
I might need to go soon. I mean, I'll wait.
Let me ask this last question.
I'm happy to talk to you because it is interesting.
No, it's a great chat. I appreciate it. Let me ask you this last question, then you can answer it however long you want. Do you believe that, let's say it's 320 AD, before the Council of Nicaea, and let's say I live in Ephesus and I'm a Christian in Ephesus. There's not been an ecumenical council. I don't have access to Rome. Can I know what the faith is and what the true faith is and what the Catholic faith is if I've never been exposed to anything coming out of the Bishop of Rome in 320 AD before Nicaea?
I suppose that depends on, you know, your relationship with the rest of the church. Like,
no, I mean, obviously, I'm joining the local church. I'm joining the church in Ephesus.
Yes. Okay. You're going there. You're there every Sunday. Let's say every holy day. If people are called to come together and
I know the faith and know the truth, but I've never had any exposure to what the Bishop of Rome is saying. Or an ecumenical council.
I mean, why not? Like, if you're a part of the church, you know, I mean, according to your ability, you know, your time, your energy.
So I've not had exposure to the Roman magisterium, and I can know the faith. So then, does the Roman magisterium, is it actually necessary?
Well, I'm assuming you know the faith. Like, if you've been baptized and you know, all the rest of it, you know, and you're a part of the church.
So the Roman magisterium isn't necessary as an epistemic principle, is my point.
Is what you're saying...
it's a very simple question.
You know
let's say...
of the truths? Or I don't understand.
No, I'm just saying... All I have to do is use an example of somebody who's never been exposed to the, quote, Roman magisterium in the year 300 or 320 prior to Nicaea, and if they can know the faith and be catechized without knowing the magisterium, then the Roman magisterium is not necessary for the faith.
Well, I mean, not necessarily. Like, I was reading recently.
Can that person have certitude about? Can they have certitude about their beliefs and be grounded without knowing what Rome is talking about? It's a very. It should be. Okay.
I think you.
Okay.
So, like, for instance, Saint Anselm, he was coming from England. He'd had no news whatsoever about, you know, that the Pope had. I mean, you know, for us it wouldn't seem that long ago, but for messages to get around Europe at that time, it took a very long time.
Right.
You know, but you know, so you know, the Pope had said, right, no more lay investiture and this kind of thing. So Anselm's coming over. He's being asked to come over to have a dialogue with, you know, Eastern brothers, you know, what we'd understand as Orthodox, and so he was coming to talk about that. All of a sudden, in the middle of this, you know, synod thing, the Pope says, "Oh yeah, so by the way, I'm going to be excommunicating the King of England."
Okay, well, I mean, this is a lot of political reframing of a very simple question. That, I mean, I'm not being rude. I'm just saying, like, none of that really is relevant to the fact that, yeah, obviously a person can be catechized at a local church in Ephesus in 320 AD and have no knowledge of Rome or the Roman bishop or the magisterium, quote unquote, and be saved. This is prior to Nicaea. So no ecumenical councils.
Sorry to talk about, you know, I think Anselm's attitude is interesting there, because he doesn't say, oh, well, I guess, I never was an archbishop or, something like that. Or, he's obviously very upset about the situation, but he was just like, oh, okay, I didn't know that this decision had now been made. And so I think that has a lot to do with the quote that you made at the very start when you opened and you spoke about the docility of Catholics. So like for someone like me, I have no authority in the church. In my house.
But this isn't really relevant to the individual's existential knowledge and certitude, which was what the point about the magisterium originally was. So I'm just saying that, look, if we admit, which it seems obvious that a person prior to Nicaea who has no access or knowledge of what's going on in Rome can know the faith and become certain and believe it. And if that's the case, then the magisterium isn't necessary.
Well, I would still say that it is, because this is like an organic thing we're talking about, to come with what, to what I was saying originally. I think that, problems with like libertarians, and to be frank, I think problems that ethnic Europeans have, who are just naturally very individualistic, is not being able to think corporately about human groups. So with something like the church, and speaking about the early church, we're talking about something that is like a baby. We're talking about something that is, still in the bud.
But I don't accept the premise of doctrinal development that Vatican I itself says that the papacy was not a dogma or doctrine that developed. So look, I appreciate it. I think we're going to move on though. We can have if you want to pop back on at any time. Any last words you want to say before we move on?
No. When you say move on, you mean move on to another topic, or?
No, I'm saying we're going to open it up beyond the Catholic topic to Protestants and Muslims and whatever else.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, no, just thanks for chatting.
It was a good chat. I appreciate you being civil and having the exchange.
No, it's nice. It's great to be able to speak with you. As I say, I've known of you for quite some time, so it's nice to be able to
let's
make a new friend and all that.
Hit me up and let's keep the chat going whenever you want.
Cool, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And if you guys want to message him or follow him, he's linked below as Richard Storey. Now I'm going to open it up if anybody wants to come on and chat. We don't have to restrict it to the Catholic papal issues. If you want to talk about Protestantism, if you want to talk about Arianism, Unitarianism, anything to do with Islam, Unitarian stuff would be good right now, because we have begun the lecture series going through the topics of Trinity in the Old Testament. Hey, Jamie? Jamie? Could you make me a double shot and bring me a water? My mouth's really dry. Notice that we had a great civil conversation. Nobody got mad. Nobody lost their marbles. Storm the Cat, $10. Thank you so much for that super chat there. Mark says for $5, this is for the Trinity in the Law and the Prophets, Part 1. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. Swad says for $10. Someone made a video called something about ignorance. Can you respond to it? I don't think it's worth giving attention, but I appreciate the super chat there, Swad. So that was that was a good civil conversation. Nobody got mad. And in regard to what he's talking about with Francis, this video popped up from Buried Before Death over on Instagram, and this is what we're referring to. This is a it looks like an EWTN broadcast. So Francis recently had this meeting with Buddhists. Everybody sort of saw this. I think Tristan and other people shared the article that Francis was calling for more inclusivity and diversity in working with Buddhists, which is odd. Actually, it's not odd, but and then this, what appears to be a chanting prayer circle occurs with Francis apparently participating. I'll play it for you. And then it goes on to cite a couple ancient canons and St. Cyril about this. But this is also ultimately in the Sixth Ecumenical Council. It talks about you're excommunicated if you go into synagogues or mosques to pray, or the assemblies of heretics and schismatics. And I kid you not, there's Roman Catholics in the chat saying this doesn't count because a Buddhist isn't a schismatic. That's how crazy these people are. Yeah, but apparently you're not aware of the scriptures that point out that the gods of the nations are devils. Okay, so it's actually even worse to go and pray in this kind of a setting, because if you look at Mortalium Animos, which is the official encyclical condemning these types of operations, it's right here. It's called Mortalium Animos 1928 by Pius XI. If you look at what he says, he not only does he condemn any interfaith gatherings of this nature, he's talking about Christians. This is about Christian ecumenism, and when it popped off in the early 20th century, it was immediately condemned. Now, this is infinite light years beyond that, not just praying together and having religious ceremonies with Anglicans or Orthodox, right? This is going full Pachamama, full Buddhism, okay? There's no Mortalium Animos. Of course, they'll never go read it. The ones that do read it become trads, and then they get stuck in the trad box. The nightmare of the trad world, which is just a whole other level of contradictions. And the whole encyclical's point is that it's a huge scandal because it's indifferentism. If you go and pray with all these religions, it gives the impression that we all worship the same God. Oh, yeah, exactly. That's what Vatican II actually says. Right? So that's my argument. I think this is one of the strong. It's not the only argument, but Mortalium Animos is one of the strongest because it's such a forceful condemnation of Christian inter-religious gatherings. It doesn't even it's not even in the mind of Pius XI that they would be doing this with the world religions. Right? So it's like a whole other level. If you want to support the discussion, you can do so via the super chats. But hey, look, see how civil that was? I mean, nobody even got like angry. And I mean, it doesn't even bother me if people are getting mad or feisty, right? Like that guy was totally civil, and we've been going back and forth in DMs. Tim and I were going back and forth in DMs today. Is anybody getting mad, losing their mind? No. But these like weird psycho 20-year-olds lose their mind and can't handle this stuff. They're like women. They can't control their emotions. And then they spam that I'm Skittles, that I'm an F word. They'll spam that I'm that. And then they're like, why'd you block me? So you spam at me all this nonsense, and then you wonder why I don't want to interact with you. Well, I'll tell you why. Titus 3, Paul says, reject the heretic after the first and second admonition, knowing that such a man is self-condemned. And so if people want to double down and be irrational and unreasonable, then why would in fact, I'm told not to have any interactions with you. You know, Martin, what's up, man? Go ahead and unmute, man. That Manuka helps, though. I'm going to have to start putting Manuka in every coffee because when I wake up, it's the allergies here. We live next to a swamp, dude. Why are you coughing? Because there's a swamp next door. And every morning when I wake up, it's like, but then if I put Manuka honey in the coffee, it's a lot better. Hey, Jamie. Could you bring me a water too? I'm really thirsty. Eno, do you want to unmute or not? You're here. All right, we'll move on. Eli?
Hello?
Hey.
Hey, Jay. I just jumped on here, and I'm just right in the middle of y'all's discussion. Are you Catholic?
No, I'm Orthodox.
Orthodox? Okay.
You
Yeah.
coffee.
see, I've been thinking about, because I'm Pentecostal, and he was in the church talking about Super Mario Brothers 3, and I'm like, what am I doing here?
That sounds like an awesome church, actually. I'm actually about to convert to Pentecostalism now that you say that.
I wasn't too thrilled.
Was it the traditional Mario Brothers rite that you were doing, or were you doing the modern apostate Luigi rite?
I'm in South Carolina.
I'm just joking, dude. That's a joke.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I don't. So, you're saying like you would never be a Pentecost?
No, it was just a joke, man.
Oh.
Anyway, so what? Go ahead with what do you want to say?
No, I was at the Catholic Church a couple days ago, earlier this week, and I was talking to one of the guys, and it was like, you guys aren't drinking the blood of Christ. Isn't that part of your Eucharist? Isn't that a part of your your sacraments and divine law? He was trying to explain all these things to me, but they don't drink the blood of Christ. They just eat the body. And I don't know. I was thinking about becoming Orthodox.
Yeah, well, I would recommend going and checking out Orthodox churches and talking to them, because we do commune with both kinds. So, that's odd. But, I mean, if you're moving away from charismaticism, the Orthodox Church absolutely rejects charismaticism, and the Roman Catholic Church has, from the papacy down, approved and affirmed charismaticism. So if you go in the Roman Catholic world, you're going to be back at the same Protestant worship and charismatic worship that you're leaving.
Huh, okay.
Yep. Yes, John Paul II, Benedict, and Francis approve of the charismatic movement.
That sucks. I don't. I'll go check out this Orthodox church around here.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
Yeah, good job, dude. Appreciate that. I'm going to move on so we can get through some of these. Jamie and I are going to go do some stuff today, so I want to kind of move quick through some of this. Eno, did you want to go try again? You got to unmute, dude. Why'd you come back if you're not? Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, me?
Yeah, what's up, man?
Yeah, Mr. J. When I heard my name, sorry for the first time.
That's okay.
From Nigeria. I'm from Nigeria. And
why are you gay? Why are you gay?
No, I'm not gay.
Are you gay? No, I'm just making a joke. That's from a meme, dude.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just joking.
I didn't understand that. I was researching Eyes Wide Shut when I came across your video for the first time.
Oh, cool.
That's when I got to know you, and I was researching. You have a lot of books, research, and all that. That's how I got to know Dyer. I learned a lot, so I'm grateful. Well, I'm a Catholic from Nigeria. Mm-hmm. And when I saw you had spaces, I decided to come in, and I'm grateful for this time to talk. The first guy you were talking to was very Vatican II. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but he just didn't answer any single question. I was like, this is just exactly.
Yeah, I think that guy's a well-intentioned guy, but I think he's probably struggling with, because he knows the traditional teaching, but then he kind of, he wants to he wants to mesh it with Vatican II.
You sure? He doesn't know. He couldn't. He was contradicting himself. The church is in crisis now. I'm a traditionalist, and I don't just know what to say. The whole thing is now everybody just confused, going their own way.
Right.
When you talk about that document, I studied it with my friends, and it's just sad. It's just
well, the point of magisterial documents is to be the final word, right? And what's funny is that when we start going to these documents, then the Roman Catholics are all telling us, no, you actually need to read all these interpretations of the interpretation. So I got to go to all these fallible theologians to make the thing work. But I was supposed to go to the magisterial document as the final word. So that's my point about that the system doesn't really deliver on the promises in terms of what the papacy is supposed to do.
Okay, have you heard of Ons von
Yeah, I've read Von Balthasar, yeah.
Oh, but he was the final straw for me, man. When I just started saying, you know what? No Usodo. Thank you.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
of course, there was a future, but
yeah, I appreciate that, but we're gonna move on. I'm gonna try to get through these. Fiji something. By the way, if you want to support the stream, you can do so via the super chat function. I want to thank Richard Storey for coming on and having a great civil conversation. So that's a model, right? And every time Tim and I have a conversation, it's a model conversation. Nobody's getting mad. I think that as you get older, you're a little more mature and able to, have these conversations without losing it. Go ahead, man. Fiji, do you want to talk? All right, you're having a hard time connecting. You want to come back out and come back in? Because sometimes that works because you're not connecting. George?
Hey, Jay.
Uh-huh.
Hey, something I noticed, I am Orthodox, but I've been arguing a lot with, not arguing, but, constructive discussions with a lot of Catholics. And one thing I noticed is the way in which they write things off is they don't tend to have a care for the harmony between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
Which is often like what you're trying to argue when you say, read mortality and animos and gather what the spirit of that is. Like, they don't care. They just say, okay, well, actually, we're just going to see what the words are that are at our disposal.
Yeah, it's called casuistry. So casuistry is the medieval sort of playing games with laws. It's very akin to what you see in Talmudic Judaism, where you can trick God by all these different techniques, and the Roman Catholics do the exact same thing.
Yeah, and I've noticed that too. I mean, they think that when they dunk on us by talking about contraception, even though they endorse NFP.
Well, Francis said condoms can be used in some cases, so they don't care.
Yeah. That's kind of what I want to say is just I don't understand the sort of clear conscience you could have when you just save face off technicality all day. It's when you clearly understand that the spirit of the law was changed.
Straining at a gnat and swallowing a camel. That's what Jesus said.
Yeah. All right. Anyways, that's it.
No, that's a great point of pointing out the attitude that's going on here to make this work and playing these games. I'm not dissing Richard, and I tried the same sort of moves when I was a Roman Catholic and I moved into the trad world, where I was like, well, can I make Vatican II mesh with what came before? How am I going to do that? Maybe this word is not actually meaning this. But the actions speak louder than the words, right? They're always saying, you know them by their fruits, right? Well, what are the fruits of Vatican II's documents? Well, I can see what they are because the post-Vatican II popes go and act on these documents. Damaged good. Remember to head on over to chalk.com, use promo code J44Life. To get discounts galore, 44% off. What's up, man? You gotta unmute.
Hey, what's up? Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. I've been listening since minute 11 of the live stream.
You been what? What'd you say?
Listening since the minute 11 of the live stream. You were already talking to the
first minute 11. Okay.
Yeah. To the first Catholic guy, and he had quite a back and forth. I broke from atheism about 2 years ago, and I am already dwelling out of agnosticism. I think that I'm only waiting on submerge my head. The thing is that I've been reading about religion, and I noticed that Christianity is the one that makes most sense. And reading and listening about Christianity, I noticed that Protestantism doesn't make any sense at all. And I'm in Latin, and I'm going to Catholic Church to see if I can grasp on it. And the only Orthodox church that I have close to me is about 5 hours away. And I'm curious about which are the fundamental differences because I've read about Catholicism and I'm quite drawn to it. I found it, the word that I've heard in Spanish is wholeness, like the wholeness of the faith. I think you say the fullness of the faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always seen the example of people that run away from Protestantism. They don't want to become Roman Catholics, so they look at Orthodoxy, but they somehow become Catholics. And it's like Protestants, they're like, you can become an Orthodox, but not a Roman Catholic. And it's like they somehow respect Orthodoxy, but no, not Roman Catholicism. But they don't.
Well, yeah, I guess that depends on what type of Protestants or where you are. Like, I don't think in the Bible Belt the Protestants are going to see any. They don't see any difference between Orthodox and Catholics. So
yeah, it's more like the historic branch. The historic branch, they.
Mm-hmm.
They.
Yeah, well,
like more
yeah, I would say if you're looking for the major differences, we did a talk called Church Papacy Schism. It's about a 3-hour talk we did some years back on the book by Dr. Philip Sherrard of the same title, Church Papacy Schism. So I would start there, and then if you go back into kind of my archives, I've got a lot of talks that go into the differences between the two. And also a lot of these debate streams, they hash out the differences. Mr. Clean. The main differences would be, ecclesiology, theology about the Trinity, filioque, essence-centered distinction, uncreated grace. Those are the doctrine of the nous. It's not in Roman Catholicism. Those are the main types of issues that will pop up. Papacy, purgatory. Mr. Clean, you want to unmute?
Hello, Jay. I just had a comment here. I've been listening. You had quoted that scripture from Titus,
Mm-hmm.
a man that the heretic after the first and second admonition reject.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, though, why you invoke that scripture. I mean, when you invite people to debate.
How would that admonition go against having those kinds of discussions?
Well, I mean, if you're asking someone to debate, and how can you admonish people, which is what admonition is if you're debating a subject, and you come to a debate with some open mind to hash out a subject. But if you're coming with, an already dogmatic position, you're not really open to debate.
No, that what qualifies or counts as a debate has nothing to do with whether you hold a position dogmatically or not.
Is that true? Explain that to me. Maybe I'm having a trouble understanding. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, just by definition, why would debating require that I be non-dogmatic? There's nothing about debating that requires that. Plenty of debaters in the history of the world have been dogmatic about their positions. If you go to the medieval church, they're debating dogma fiercely. If you go to the ecumenical councils of the church, the heretics and the Orthodox come together and fiercely debate. So it has nothing to do with, quote, being open-minded.
I agree with that. And that's the thing. They did debate those things. They just didn't shut down debate after the first and second admonition. They listened.
No, in some cases they do. That's Paul's point. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. Paul's giving you a general rule to apply to when it's appropriate in your situation. So if I notice that somebody is consistently doubling down and tripling down and being hard-headed, then I would consider that person a heretic. Heretic is not just being wrong. It has to do with being obstinate in the error that you have. And then when you're shown and not being correct, when you're incorrigible, that's actually the essence of the heresy, is being incorrigible, not just being wrong.
So how is that any different than like a papist point of view of, after a first and second admonition, them excommunicating you or the whole Orthodox Church?
I mean, I wouldn't fault them for doing it. They actually already did that in 1054. So what do you mean?
You would not fault them for doing that?
Well, I mean, they're being consistent.
Even though papism is incorrect
in a
They're being
them
well.
being
No,
a
I'm
heretic
saying I
themselves.
don't fault them for trying to be consistent with their views. But do you understand that Paul went out and debated in the synagogues fiercely in the book of Acts? Does that mean Paul wasn't dogmatic because he debated?
No, absolutely not. But
Okay, so then there's nothing.
He was talking. He was talking to a synagogue. He wasn't speaking to it. He was actually going out and being, in a sense, offensive on offense, not defense. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I'm doing. How is that any different than what I'm doing?
Well, he's not going into a synagogue, is he? And then calling people a heretic. He was referring to heretics of his own flock that were rejecting.
Well, it's the same
his
principle.
authority as an apostle.
It's the same
so
principle.
I think there's two different. No, it's not. Come on, Jay.
What are you talking about? Like, your argument doesn't even make any sense. I have no idea what you're actually arguing.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense because you have a priori argument. You're coming from a position that I don't think is truly objective.
I don't believe in objective positions. Everybody's positions are theory laden. Why are you interrupting me on something that's not even worth getting upset about?
I'm not upset. Don't accuse me of being upset. I'm not upset at all. And I'm not interrupting you any more than
you do
interrupt
sound
other
like
people.
you're getting upset, so it's not an accusation. It's what the sound of your voice
what
conveys.
I'm saying is I think you're mischaracterizing me. So here we go. St. Paul goes into a synagogue. Is he justified for calling someone a heretic after the first and second admonition of someone disagreeing with him?
It's a case-by-case basis of where a person if they double down in their heresy, then yes, that's why the apostles, for example, shook the sand off of their feet when their message wasn't received at certain places, so they moved on. It's the same principle that Paul's engaging in the book of Titus. I don't understand what your actual criticism is. You seem to.
No, I'm just going.
Hold on.
I heard you.
Hold on. So let me make this point, and then I want you to explain it to me, because the first thing you said was that, why are you doing this when you're not open-minded about debating? There's nothing about debating that requires being open-minded. So I don't know where you got that idea first. And then the other stuff that you got into, I'm just completely lost as to what you're actually critiquing.
Okay. You had, I don't know who you were referencing to as far as that invoking Titus about a heretic.
So I've interacted with countless Roman Catholics in the last few days who are operating in that way. Okay.
So that's what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Is that. And so I heard that you wanted to have a debate, and I'm like, okay, if you're going to have an open debate, why would you invoke that scripture if you're wanting to debate the heretics themselves?
Because I'm specifically talking about the people that I'm not interacting with anymore, that I've interacted with for years, who operate like lunatics. So people were asking, why are you blocking these people? Because the people that I've invited to debate wouldn't come debate. And they're people I've interacted with for a long time, and they won't debate, so I'll just move on. Why would I keep interacting with people who act like lunatics?
I think that puts this a little bit more in context, because someone listening, I could not follow why. It just seems like an inner contradiction to invite people to debate, and then as soon as you do so, invoke that scripture. But that makes a little bit more sense.
No, I've been here opening this up for people to debate for like 6 years. So there's no I'm just randomly just being mad at people for no reason. No, these are people who act like lunatics. So that's why. So did you have a topic you want to discuss, or do you want to go anywhere else?
No, Jay, I find you to be a very interesting man, very thoughtful man. I don't agree with you on everything. There's lots of things I could debate with you on, but
okay. Well, what do you
now's
disagree
not the
with?
time. I appreciate you letting me come on and ask you about this, though.
Okay. What do you disagree with?
Oh goodness, there's lots of things I could.
Well, what's like the biggest thing?
Well, I think that I made a comment on a couple days ago on the Rublev icon that you posted with regard to the Trinity, and I'm familiar with that icon. And I was just a little confused of your position on it. Maybe you can explain that. And maybe that could go into...
On the icon itself or the Trinity in the Old Testament?
Yeah, like your interpretation of that icon with regard to Rublev,
and just regard to what you believe the Orthodox point of view is on that icon.
Well, I mean, the text of Genesis that I covered last night in the Trinity lecture explains that one of the visitors is the Lord. It's the angel of the Lord identified as Jesus. The other two angels are angels. And the very next chapter, the very first verse, says that, and then the two angels left to go and basically destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. So it's a symbol of the Trinity in the sense that there's three, but the only member of the Trinity that's visibly, physically present is the Logos, the angel of the Lord.
So you're okay. So it is, but you're saying that the fathers used that as a symbol of the Trinity, even though two of them were created angels.
That's what the text says in the next chapter when it says that then the two angels came to Sodom in the evening. That's the two angels that left this meal with Abraham.
I'm sure you're familiar with the whole doctrine of orthodoxy about uncreated and created and how that gets into real peculiar places.
Yeah, they're called theophanies.
Theology. Yeah. Why would, in light of that, why would they take two created beings, these two angels, and attribute that to any kind of symbol for the Trinity? Why would that be?
Because of the principle of eidos, which is that the idea of the Father or the idea of the Spirit are mentioned all throughout the Scriptures. Anytime you have the letters F-A-T-H-E-R or S-P-I-R-I-T or Holy Spirit, those are created symbols of the Trinity.
Yeah, I think these kinds of things only make sense to Christians who have been thoroughly indoctrinated to their own ideology. Like
why does that only make? Hold on. Why does that only make? I mean, that's just an argument from John Damascus about symbology.
I know, but maybe I'm just shifting gears just a little bit.
Sure.
But as Christians who are looking out into the world and ready to correct all forms of, doctrine, whether you're Muslim or Jewish or Hindu or what have you, there's so many things like this that just really do not make sense. They only make sense to Christians who are in their own hothouse and breathing their own air.
Okay, so you don't think that, let me examine, for last night we did an entire 2-hour talk just on theophanies in Genesis, and you're saying that that's all just hot air that I kind of imbibed, that the texts themselves don't actually present the form of God in the sense of this person that's walking around that's called God many times?
No, I'm not really attacking you personally. I'm speaking generally from
Okay, so you don't have an actual argument against anything I said. Now you're going to the fact that I'm just indoctrinated.
I have the argument. No, I do. It's only in this, not to you. Again, this is not a personal attack. This is to you.
I'm not taking it personally.
This is an address to like a Christian, an
so
overall Christian
hold on. Do you
position.
think that the Bible doesn't teach the Trinity? Is that what you're saying?
It may or may not. I obviously the Jews don't think it does.
What does that have to do with whether it teaches it or not?
Well,
do you understand that's a fallacy?
Let me ask you this question.
Do you understand that that's a fallacy?
Do you have to believe in the Trinity?
Do you understand that that's a fallacy first?
As someone who's it's only a fallacy if you're within the Christian church and you ascribe to that.
Okay, so you think fallacies are, no, the argument that you made is a fallacy. It has nothing to do with what church you're in.
Do you have to believe in the Trinity in order to be saved?
Do you understand why that's a fallacy?
I don't understand.
The argument that you made, you said Jews don't believe in the Trinity. That has nothing to do with whether Trinity is true or false. Do you understand that that's a fallacy?
I don't know how that's a fallacy, but let's just take that for granted.
Okay, let me explain how it's a fallacy. Muslims don't have your view.
Okay.
Okay, so do you understand that it has no relevance? It's a fallacy of irrelevance.
Okay, fine. Do you have
Is that a fallacy or not?
It's a fallacy.
Okay, go ahead.
Do you have to believe in the Trinity in order to be saved?
Yes.
So what you're okay. Explain why.
Well, it's the fundamental revelation of the Scriptures that's who God is. And if we don't accept what Revelation tells us about who God is, then we're not worshiping God as he wants to be worshiped and known. So you said the Scriptures may or may not teach the Trinity. What is your position?
say that I'm a man who's never heard of anything
Okay,
before.
but what is your position?
No, my
So you're not
position
going
is
to
say that I'm a brand new baby and I've never heard of anything before.
Why don't you?
I have no position.
Instead
Say I
of
have
okay,
no
so you're
position.
so you think you're an agnostic? Is that what you're saying?
No, Jay, just say I'm a
No,
brand
I
new.
don't want to argue with hypotheticals. Like, you don't have an
No.
actual position.
No, take this for what it is.
So
Take
you don't
this
have
as
an
if I
actual
was just born
position.
today. Take it
Why
as I
would
was
you
just
not?
born
Why
today
would you
as
not?
Adam.
Why would you not defend your own position?
Why do I have to? Who says I do?
Well, usually debates involve one position being defended against another, and I think.
And I'm debating
okay.
you as someone who knows
Okay,
nothing.
well, so can I start debating for some random other position? Would that make any sense? Why would you not defend
No,
your?
I'm asking you. I'm asking
Because
you to present
it's
the case.
because it signifies bad faith if you're not going to defend your own position or say what it is.
Who says that? Why do you think so? Why do you immediately judge me as bad faith for just coming and asking?
Because
questions?
it shouldn't be
you're
difficult.
Saying I have to
because
believe in a Trinity in order to be saved.
It's sophistry if you won't say what your belief or your position is.
Your name calling. What does sophistry mean? Explain. Why are
Sophistry
you name calling?
is an action. It's not name calling.
It's no. You just called it sophistry. That's calling me a sophist. Explain
It's an
why.
action, right? That you're engaging in sophistry.
Okay, what is the action? Explain that.
Why can you not say what your position is?
What does sophistry mean?
That you won't answer questions directly. You talk around it. You give bad answers. You give bad arguments, fallacies, etc. All that's sophistry.
That's what sophistry means.
As well as arguing over words and definitions of terms.
I no. Well, that's exactly where I'm getting. That's exactly where I'm getting now.
You ran away. Well, hold on.
You're arguing over a Trinity that says someone's not saved unless they believe it.
Correct.
You're arguing over words right there.
Well, we started with the
That's not
text. But hold on. We started with the text, and you ran away from that. Why don't you want to go back to the text?
What text are you referring to?
I said last night I gave a 2-hour lecture on the theophanies just from Genesis.
What text are you referring to in Genesis?
There's about 40, I would say.
The whole book?
No, 40 texts of theophanies. I'm rounding it around to about 40.
I was not a part of this discussion last night, Jay.
Okay, but my point is that we can go through those texts, and why don't you want to go to those texts and explain to me why it's not the triad?
No, go for it. We can go one by one.
Well, I started with the text, and you said, well, you're indoctrinated to believe those things. That was what your argument was.
Well, you certainly, I don't think you realize that you are, but you are.
Okay, wait a minute. So you're not indoctrinated?
I don't know if I am or not.
My argument is my approach to all these kinds of questions is that every human being is indoctrinated and religiously holds their worldview. So whatever your mysterious, unnamed worldview is that you won't defend, you hold it as a religious commitment, is my view.
Maybe not.
No, everyone does.
No,
by necessity. By necessity, you do.
You make a lot of these affirmations that I don't necessarily see within myself. I mean, you have every right to say this stuff, but I'm not so sure it's these things you're saying are true.
I think it's that you can demonstrate the fundamental nature of how a worldview works. Everybody has fundamental commitments that they believe on a faith-based sense that they're not willing to give up unless those presuppositions are themselves challenged. So if you're an agnostic, let's say, you're going to interpret things according to your paradigm. You're correct that I interpret things according to my paradigm, and I am indoctrinated. I just simply believe that everyone is. Even if you're an agnostic, you're also indoctrinated, and you hold it as.
I'm not really opposed to what you're saying right now, Jay. I think you're probably you're probably correct.
Right. So that's why I end up oftentimes, if I'm talking to an atheist or an agnostic, I end up arguing this sort of presuppositional transcendental argument stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not here to argue as some kind of moving target. Really what I'm trying to tag down here is kind of really your position as why is the Trinity necessary for salvation? Can you explain that to me? Because
God, if that's who God is, and we believe that it is, and if that's how he reveals himself, and if we're being invited into that Trinitarian life, that's what eternal life is, as Jesus says in John 17, is to partake of that eternal glory that he had with the Father before the foundation of the world, and to become sons of God, and then to share in that Trinitarian communion, then for us, that's what's absolutely necessary to be preached and taught.
Yeah, this is a system of ideas that's
Well, you asked me what the position is. So
Yeah.
calling
And
it
I-
ideas doesn't do anything or prove or disprove anything.
and I understand that this is a Christian worldview, and it makes
Right.
sense to Christians within that worldview.
Okay, so do you are you wanting to argue why the Christian worldview is true? Is that what you're going for?
I think that probably ends up there. Is why
Sure.
to the whole world this idea that God is a Trinity is somehow salvific. Meaning, what are you? And first off, you have to believe in the Trinity in order to be saved, and then you have to ask the question: saved from what?
Well, saved from your own choices, your own damnation, your own evil.
Who says that I'm damned and my own evil in the first place for me to even know that I need that?
Well, again, divine revelation is our ultimate authority and commitment, and men are fallen, and so they need.
Circular argument, which
Yeah, but I by affirming that we all have our religious commitments, I believe that paradigm level arguments are circular.
Okay, well, that's a good admission. But we will often point out to people that their arguments are
Yeah,
circular.
that's different from a vicious circle. That's two different things because it's two different orders of argument, different categories.
Okay, so when it's convenient, you just pick them between
No, two different categories. So if you had a philosophy class, you might know this because there's such a thing as like, have you had any classes on Wittgenstein?
Well, first off, to assume that I haven't is kind of rude to just say that.
I can't assume it because I already know from the way you answered that you haven't, because you would be familiar with these topics.
That's very judgmental, and maybe I'm
okay. So now it's about.
No, you made it personal. You made it personal, Jay.
No, I can already tell that you're not familiar because you would know these things if you'd had an epistemology class or if you'd had a class on Wittgenstein.
You're being very clever, and it's not working.
No,
it's
not working. You think I'm just trying to be tricky here? No, I'm talking about actual.
No, you most certainly are.
Uh-huh. I don't know.
Okay,
all I know is tricks. Yeah.
We can get back on track.
Yeah, so
I won't be going down.
Can you explain? The point here is that the way that language, for example, works is that you can't define language or meaning without referring to language or meaning. So at a base level, linguistic philosophy is circular, and worldviews are the same way. If you're going to talk about what your ultimate epistemic authority is, for example, at a certain point, you're ultimately going to have to appeal to something that's self-referencing, right?
Let's start at the very beginning. What does the word God mean? Since you're so well on epistemology, explain where the etymology of the word God comes from.
Well, that would be the etymological fallacy, first of all, because the origin of the word is not going to matter to what our debate is.
Okay, no, define the word God and then tell me where it comes from. Let's build.
I don't have to. What does the English transliteration of theos have to do with what we're talking about? I'm making a point. Hold on. I'm making a point about logic and argumentation and starting points, right? So,
do we use words in logic? Logic comes from the word logos, and it has to do with words. So let's go there.
Yeah, and so all I'm pointing out is that in philosophy and linguistic philosophy, you'll note that at a certain point things are circular because you have to rely on the same thing that you're appealing to, right?
Everything is circular, Jay. I agree.
No,
now let's go back to the word
not
God.
Everything is. At a fundamental, ultimate level, things are circular. Not everything is circular. So that's why I said it's a category error.
Let's start from the very beginning. Where does the English word God come from?
Are you going to defend a position or say what your position is? Are you an agnostic?
Step by step.
So you don't want to engage. You don't want to engage in a transcendental argument discussion.
I want to define our terms. Let's define our terms.
I've already said that God picks out the Trinity or God the Father specifically.
What does God mean in English? What does that word come from?
Do you want me to just I repeat it? It picks out for us God the Father. The English transliteration or origin has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
There is no English transliteration.
God is a reference to theos in the Greek. God is a generic term.
Theos is the Greek word for God, but
right.
why was the English word God chosen? What does the word God mean in English? Where does that word come from, and why did the translators of the word God?
Are you the guy who says that God is the word gad and that it's a demon?
Am I saying that? No.
Are you that guy?
No, I am not that guy.
Okay, so how is this?
I don't even know what are you referring to, real quick?
There's another guy who comes on and argues this point, and he says that the word God is identical phonetically to the text in Isaiah that says that they worshipped Gad, and that God is a demon.
No, I don't know anything.
Okay, well, you
about
sound like
that
that guy, so I thought that you were him.
Well, no, I have no idea what that is, but I mean, I'm just using.
This has nothing to do with whether there's a transcendental argument for God's existence or not. Do you want to talk about that, or you just want to argue about words? Because everything you've done is deflect away from anything substantial.
No, I don't. I think it's very substantial when we're trying to get to the very words that we're using to describe.
Well, every point I've made, you've deflected off to some other point. Now we're having to talk about. What is your point with the word God? What's your point?
You can't even use language in the first.
That's not what transcendental means. You don't even know what you're talking about. Or you think you don't even know what this is? Like, what do you think a transcendental argument is?
Define transcendental, Jay.
You said it's not. No. You said that it's not that, so that means that you know. And what is it?
No, please go ahead and define the term for
us.
No,
you already spoke as if you know, so I want you to tell me.
I will work with your definition. Just define the term.
No,
please.
What is a transcendental argument?
I don't know it, Jay. Tell me.
Oh, right. So, well, then why did you act like you knew?
No, maybe I do. I want to know your definition.
I'm not going to debate if you don't know because you played like you knew. So you're not a good faith debater. You're a sophist.
What I'm trying to do, and I'm sure the audience can probably.
No, the audience is laughing at you, dude.
I'm trying. No, they're not.
Yes, they are. I can see. Well, I can see the chat of about 700 people laughing and calling you a meltdown. So what's a transcendental? What's a transcendental argument?
I'm trying to attack someone down.
What's a transcendental argument? What is it?
You said
you knew what it was. What is a transcendental argument? Silence.
No, don't. What I'm trying to.
What is it?
What I'm trying to do is
So you don't actually know.
What I'm trying.
Everyone is laughing. You see, it's all LOLs.
Look, you can try to humiliate me into the corner.
No, you did this yourself.
What I'm trying to do is actually have a conversation about real words here.
You said that words. So you're not gonna. You're not gonna answer.
No, words that are based in reality and not transcendental, not above our heads.
That's not even what the word means. So you didn't know. So you didn't know what a transcendental argument was, but you played like you did. That's not what it means.
Okay, fine. Let me just say, I don't know what it means. Please define it for me.
Right. It's a type of argumentation that comes out of Aristotle and Kant, where you prove something by the impossibility of the contrary. The form, for example, is X is the necessary precondition of Y, Y therefore X. So that's how we argue against any position that's agnostic or atheist, by showing that they can't give an account for their assumptions and their presuppositions or their use of logic.
You just said a lot of words, and I'm sure philosophically it's all correct and nice and tidy.
All right, we're done. Kelton.
Oh, hey.
Yep.
Am I up? Sorry, there's a delay. Jay, big fan. So I was thinking of I listened to your revamped Theophanies lecture last night. I'm really excited for that. I also went back and watched the debate between Father Deacon Ananias and Matt Slick. It's also a classic. So I guess this is a sincere question, not doggedly asking this.
Okay.
When your last couple of callers, you mentioned, look, I just went to the text and proved the Trinity. That smacked of me the same issue that Matt Slick had of saying, let's just go to the Bible and read it, and it says what it says. Because I think the last caller was arguing, well, the Jews disagree with that, because I think, as Father Deacon Ananias argued, we all come to the text.
Yeah, correct.
How would you escape
right.
that superficial comparison that I just made?
Yeah, it's a good question. So when we say that the Protestant approach of, well, I just go to the text and the text means what it says and says what it means, typically that's just arguing as if all you need to do is like look at the Greek and see what the Greek says. That doesn't mean that we can't look at the Greek and see what the Greek says, or look at the text and see what it says. It means that we have to do it holistically. So like I pointed out at the beginning of last night's lecture, the Trinity is not a doctrine necessarily that you're going to prove from like one verse or from like this thing over here. The Trinity will be known and proven holistically from the canonical text as a whole. So you're going to do canonical interpretation, and even Protestants tend to agree with this. So when I often point that out about James White, I'm really just pointing out that James White's being inconsistent with his own approach to the text and with his own belief in presuppositionalism and kind of reading the things holistically. The only difference between us and the Protestant that admits that there's a holistic canonical reading is that we don't restrict that holistic sense to just the Bible. We also include the attestation of the church fathers, the councils, the lives of the saints, the liturgy. So it's all a holistic thing. And there's not like one thing that you go to that's like the final thing, like, oh, it's just this Bible verse over here, or oh, it's this thing over here. But that doesn't mean that I can't go to the text and read the text. It doesn't mean I can't proof text. It doesn't mean I can't even quote mine. It's just a question of, a lot of times when people quote mine, for example, they do it without the context or they do it out of context. So it's not quote mining or proof texting or going to the text or anything like that. That's the problem. Dude, you don't have to keep thumbing down. I'll bring you on, man. I'm not talking to you, Kelton. I'm talking to this other dude.
Yeah, that's okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's what Vatican and I argued, is that you need to do your scripture holistically, but also like the church testimony holistically. Say a Jew, just I'm wondering if this all collapses down to the tag argument here. If a Protestant and a Jew and you, an Orthodox, come in and you all holistically quote, the Torah plus
Well, in the case of the Jew, for example, if he's only going to cite the Torah and the prophets, then in that case I would have to go into his accepted authority, like Justin Martyr does, right? When Justin Martyr's debating with Trypho the Jew, he goes to the Old Testament passages and tries to make his case from all the theophanies, just like we do.
I see. So I'm just imagining, so I read 100 pages of Protestant apologetics, 100 pages of Orthodox apologetics. If there's equal content, how do you have to fall back on just saying, look, the church is inspired, it's the Orthodox Church from history, we win by default?
Well, no, if I was talking to a Protestant at that point, I would not grant that he has the right canon or that he can even know what the canon is apart from the attestation of the church in history. So that's typically where I take the canon debate at that point.
Okay, yeah. So even if you could
with a Protestant,
right? So a Jew says, no, you're reading back Trinitarian stuff into the Old Testament.
Well, at that point, I would say that first, modern Jewish scholarship, as I argued, because that's identical to the Muslim argument, right? So if you watch the debate with Daniel Hakikachu, this is where that debate went, where I was like, well, first of all, modern Jewish scholarship admits that ancient Hebrew revelation was not monolithically Unitarian, right? And then I would move to, and then if we look at the texts themselves, they do show multiplicity in God. So there's nothing inherently wrong with going to the text. And I would just point out, like we did last night, right? We went through, 1 whole or 2 whole hours of just theophanies in Genesis, probably, 40 of them. 30.
Yeah, excellent. I'm just trying to get a better sense of, when you can, do quote unquote, your study last night was just J in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
Or when you pull in the church fathers, or when you need to go to someone else's epistemology.
Well, I think that it's never wrong to do that. It depends on the case and who you're debating with. So again, if it's a Muslim, they're only going to accept what they want out of the previous revelation. And so that's why I like going to that argument of, well, are you consistent with prior revelation? If it's a Jew, they're only going to accept certain texts. So I would be forced to go to their text, like Justin Martyr does with Trypho. So it's kind of like the same point about, well, what about evidences? Like if you're a transcendental argument proponent, are you against evidences? Don't you always critique evidentialists? No, there's nothing wrong with evidences. In fact, going to the texts are like evidences, right? So each of these theophany texts is a piece of evidence to make my case. And the making of that case, unfortunately, does require a more holistic perspective, whether it's all the Old Testament or whether it's the Old and the New Testament, or whether it's the Old and New Testament and the teaching of the church fathers and the tradition of the church. Like, that's the holistic context from which I'm being informed. But that doesn't mean that I can't use or do evidences. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And so last night wasn't you in a Bible and pre-list. That was you with an appropriate scope for the audience. But you have a back catalog of other avenues to go to if your argument is targeted. Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much, Jay.
Sure. Yeah, the point is not like, can we can we go to the Bible or not to prove things? Of course. Like if you go to the ecumenical councils or if you read the church fathers, they're constantly citing the scriptures to prove their positions. So proof texting itself is not a problem. And even quote mining itself is, by definition, isn't wrong. But if you quote mine out of context, then it's deceptive and misleading. It's a different thing. But also, it's really the paradigm that we're coming from and how holistically we're informed. And so if we have a totality perspective of Old and New Testament and teaching of the church and so forth, then we're much more capable. We have a much better tool set to correctly interpret the particulars. So each particular text, again, is going to be interpreted via our knowledge of the whole text, right? And this is called canonical interpretation or holistic interpretation. Likewise, it's also going to be informed by more than just the text themselves. It's also going to be, right, the Council of Nicaea, Athanasius, their definitions of, eternal generation, et cetera, et cetera. All of those things are going to be part of my paradigm and my presupposition when I read these texts. Absolutely, I admit that. But they're also not just presuppositions. There's a reflexive, symbiotic relationship between me reading the text, being informed as a holistic thing, me going back and reading the text, me then also reading other texts and being informed in a holistic way. So there's just this constant back and forth that is, I think, this process of revelation and knowing God, in part. Okay, so you've been raising your hand here. Faith Alone wants to come on. Go ahead. You gotta unmute. Go ahead. Did you raise your hand like 20 times? What's up? Laughing at everything I said. Where you at? Did you turn your mic permissions on? We can't hear you, dude. Faith Alone, are you there? I want you to come in. You were losing it there. Yeah.
Hello?
What's up?
Hello?
Yeah, why are you spurging out? What's up?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up? Why are you spurging out?
Oh, wait. Yeah, if you look in history, like Orthodoxy and Catholicism, you'll find that they were really dominated by Muslims and they could never take the Holy Land. But the one people who could easily is the Protestant Christians, America, UK, faith alone Christians. We easily took the Holy Land. We slaughtered the Muslims.
You can't honestly think this guy's a troll. So this is...
I'm not. I'm serious.
No, you're not.
It's true.
So dude's literally going to try to pick his religion on, quote, taking the promised land by faith alone. I'm sorry, but that's just not even, that's like below the lowest tier of acceptable argumentation. I can't do it. Giefer. Yeah, unmute, dog.
Hello?
Hey.
Hey, sorry. There was like a delay, so
It's fine.
So I don't know. I'm a young kid. I'm an Orthodox catechumen, and I usually try not to argue with my relatives, but they'll kind of come and attack my faith, I guess. And so one of them's a Catholic. And I just wanted to know your take on, so a lot of the times when I've ever debated Catholics, and specifically when my aunt was pressing on Orthodoxy, she's she would ignore almost everything and just go to the Catholic position is better for contrast and these other things that have nothing to do with ecclesiology, and she would just keep going back to that.
I would just try to honestly avoid these conversations with family members. There's just really no point in trying to debate a family member. I understand if they ask you questions and you feel sort of on the defensive, you want to, and I'm not saying it's always wrong to, but I would just say, look, why don't you just come check out church and notice the difference between the liturgy at the Orthodox Church than at your church, right? I mean, that's probably going to do a lot better for your aunt than logic and philosophy. Like an aunt is probably going to be more convinced by the aesthetics than, some argument. Now, Diana Henry, you were making a huge fuss yesterday. Do you want to come on and make your arguments about why it's okay to pray in mosques as a so-called Christian? All right. I mean, you're in the chat. You said you wanted to come chat, so you're invited to speak. Alpha or Diane? Diane, you want to go first?
Yeah, it's Diana. Thanks for having me. I was just trying to make the point that, your understanding lacks charity, basically love. And it's like the other side of, well, actually, it's what...
Hold on, Alpha. Let her speak.
I mean...
Hold on. Let me remove this.
True. If you look at history, only America and the UK was able to destroy the Ottomans, take the Holy Land. The Catholics failed. The Orthodox failed. They were captured.
This
by
is a
Ottomans.
mentally ill person, so hold on.
The only people who could take...
Go ahead, Diana.
Why is he on stage if he's mental?
How am I supposed? I don't know who these people are.
Okay. So yeah, that was basically my comment. I understand you. I don't know why you deleted your post.
I didn't want to give attention to some of those people. So why is it uncharitable to talk about what your own church teaches?
No, I'm not saying that you can talk about whatever you want. I mean, that's part of logic and reason.
Where's the uncharitable part?
Is that not being able to accept other people where they are, and that their faith tradition that they were brought up in, and these are strongly held religious beliefs. And maybe perhaps if you consider, though, I mean, I was born Catholic. I don't know if you were, but if I was born Muslim or say Jewish or something like that.
But that has nothing to do with whether it's true or false. And how does that make me uncharitable? Where's the lack of charity? I don't understand.
Well, understanding where someone's coming from, though.
I mean, hold on. I've debated. I used to be a Roman Catholic.
Let me just finish.
Well, why do you think I don't understand where they're coming from? We've debated the top Muslims out there, and I used to be a Roman Catholic. So what do you mean?
No, I'm not. My whole point is, if you were born Muslim, say, because I've met other people from other faith traditions, and I was born Catholic, so I'm one of the lucky ones, right? But they have these strongly held religious beliefs, and how I came to this conclusion, though. Here on Twitter, I started following the Khomeini, right? They all call America the great Satan. And they're right. If you look at like what's going on in Hollywood, what we support, all our laws, abortion, same-sex marriage, all that. They are genuinely trying in their own way, from their own upbringing, what they know, right? And so you have to meet people where they are, and there's another aspect.
But we do that all the time. We do that all the time because I've been doing this for about 6 years of these open spaces where anybody can come in and make any arguments they want. So I just fail to see how that's not meeting people where they are.
Well, no, I'm trying to make the association that that's what the Pope is trying to do.
No. That's a false analogy because your own papal documents forbid you to go and participate in the religious services of other groups and other religions.
Okay, so this is exactly my point, Jade.
Okay, so what charity actually means?
And he's trying to reach out to other people.
That's not what he's doing. That's not what he's doing.
You don't know that, though.
I do know that because he has said not to proselytize these people.
Well, so the Catholic Church teaches, though, it's all about your actions, right? And being an example and a light in the world. That's not true.
It's also about your actions in terms of what you publicly religiously do, such as praying in mosque towards Mecca. You understand that that's an action of apostasy in your own theology.
So, if you believe that God,
okay, so you don't think that that's the case?
I'm trying to answer your point here.
Do you believe that your church teaches that or not?
That teaches to do things. What it had written back, whatever you reference, because I'm not a historian.
So really Mortalium Animos says that if you go and participate in other church services or other religious services, that it's a surrendering of the Catholic faith and it's an action of apostasy. And you're telling me here, no, it doesn't count because he's there to evangelize them. That's not true, because both of these popes are ecumenists, the last two that have gone into mosque, and they actually say not to proselytize.
So listen, if like before Jesus, okay, you had Plato, Socrates.
So you're not going to address that's irrelevant to this.
I'm trying to, if you would let me finish my point.
So but it doesn't matter because your church already.
Why doesn't it matter though?
Because of what you're. Because that's an irrelevant point.
Well, I'm out then. Okay,
it's
so you won't let me finish my point.
No, because it's not relevant. You can finish the point all you want, but that point is not relevant. If your church says in 1928 you can't do this, you can't go back to, well, in the Old Testament period, they believed in a Unitarian God. Like, that's not relevant to the fact that in 1928 it says you can't do this. And that it's a surrendering of the faith. So all that tells me is that it's a contradiction. Marinkus.
Hey, Jay.
Yo.
I just had a quick question. Obviously, we've been critiquing in the Roman Catholic system. If you have dogmas contradicting each other, then that would be it would falsify the whole Catholic system. I'm just wondering if there's anything that would falsify the Orthodox system, or if you would appeal to tag kind of making it unfalsifiable, because you'd lose your basis for knowledge at all. So I was just curious what you thought about that.
Well, I mean, I have to believe that there's not any position that would destroy the Orthodox faith. But that doesn't mean that I'm saying it's unfalsifiable. Unfalsifiability is like a thing where you construct a system it's like a trick, right? Where, for example, if you're a Marxist, Marxism is unfalsifiable because if you critique Marxism, all of your arguments are invalidated because only a bourgeois person would critique Marxism. So you see how that makes like the system unfalsifiable? So unfalsifiability is a weakness in a system. It's not something that you want to try to construct for your system.
Right, I gotcha.
So no, I don't think orthodoxy is unfalsifiable. I just think that it's true.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Thanks.
I do think, by the way, that the way they construct the proofs and arguments for the papacy, they try to make it unfalsifiable. And so in that sense, it's very similar to Marxists. Top Coon. By the way, if you want to support the stream, you can do so via Super Chats. Go ahead.
Hey, Jay, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I just wanted to get up here. I'm an Orthodox catechumen, but I had a question because I had a conversation with a Roman Catholic, and they brought up the point that Constantinople fell, and that
it
was
fell when it was uniate. Yeah, but it fell when it was uniate, so they don't ever mention that, do they?
Yeah, so they use that as a point of like hell shall not prevail over the church, and because it's a mosque, that's like a way to prove their point.
Wait. Their argument, number one, we don't view Constantinople like the Vatican, so that's a dumb, like super low IQ argument. And by the way, the Vatican wasn't the Pope at one time like locked up in the Vatican when the Masons took Rome? So does that invalidate Rome? Haven't Roman Catholics lost battles to Muslims? And this is such a stupid argument. So basically, all this means is that I can arbitrarily interpret events in history to be proofs of Catholicism based on historical blessings and cursings. However, if you read Augustine's City of God, the entire apologetic that Augustine is making against the Romans is to deny that principle, that historical collapses and falls of empires prove or disprove the religion. That's the whole apologetic of City of God. So it's very stupid of Roman Catholics to try to use that as some sort of divine sign. And by the way, when we point out that the Roman Catholic Church is full of creeps, PDFs, and weirdos, and that it's in a crisis, oh, guess what? Suddenly that proves their church, because only the true church would be persecuted and infiltrated. So you see how that's a great example of the very unfalsifiability that we just mentioned. OG man.
Yo, Jay, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Okay, there's a small delay. So I was an atheist. First of all, thank you so much for the things you put online, for all the free work that you put for us. I mean, I don't think there's anyone online that do the things you do. So thank you very much for that.
Sure.
I was an atheist like since I was 12, and I stopped being an atheist like 2 years ago. Much because of you, pretty much. But my question is on tag. It's a really simple question. Is why or how do you place God in the exposition? It's basically that. Thank you.
In the exposition, or you mean like where in the argument is God? What do you mean?
Yeah, why? How do you place God there? Why can't you place something like a force that we didn't discover yet, or something like?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's a good question, right? So the way I would answer that is, like specifically the Christian metaphysic, it posits a unique type of deity that the other world religions don't have. So, for example, a world, a metaphysic where God is uncreated and the creation is distinct from him, and yet he's present in the world, and yet he's one and many, and yet he has intentionality for the world. The world has telos or purpose. Those aspects of the Christian metaphysic, for example, they disprove or they resolve the problems where you don't have a world or a universe with purpose or intention. In philosophy, that's called dysteleological, or it's a dysteleological universe, meaning that the universe doesn't have purpose. If God, quote unquote, was just an immaterial force, then there would not be any intentional direction or end of the universe. It would just be random. It would be what's called accidentalism. And if there's accidentalism that rules, then we really can't have any coherence or meaning at all. It basically destroys the possibility of order, structure, and meaning in the world and the universe. So that's just one example from teleology. But we also have like a basis for grounding universals and particulars. We would have a basis for regularity of nature, and so we wouldn't be subjected to the critiques of David Hume and skeptics, right? So these are some examples, the immateriality of abstract objects, numbers, etc. All of those things, if you take them and put them into a big ball, all those metaphysical principles that are needed to have a coherent worldview, what grounds that? Well, the triune God, that's what worldview his system proclaims to have. And so therefore, that would be the philosophical argument. And that's the God that we would want to then come to know. Father Moses, did you want to speak?
I just was going to pick up with what you were saying earlier at the beginning.
Sure.
I got my grub on, but didn't big out. Finally got a call from my wife one a day ago. Hit the corner as I hit the door, thinking, will I live? Another 24.
Yeah, I literally every morning, that's what I wake up to. I'm just joking. I don't do that every morning.
No, I circling back on what you were saying just a minute ago. It's like something we've often talked about, which is like the whole parameters of making sense of Catholicism require you to basically acquire a cultic mindset.
Right.
Where everything that would disprove it or does not align itself with reality in any way, shape, or form, even common sense, is actually utilized as a defense for why it's correct. And it just you can't do that without suspending all kinds of rational thought and like I said, common sense, which you often find in cultic movements, and really it's what you find in the culture today. It's the occult kind of idea of 1 + 1 = 3, right? So you're always having to kind of supersede anything logical in order to make sense of it. So anyways, that was it.
No, I think I'm glad that you mentioned that cult aspect, because I brought that up. I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before, that the more I think about it, the more it does seem like a cult. And that's not to say that every individual Roman Catholic is a bad person or bad-willed. I think that you're over time, you manifest yourself as either bad-willed when you confront these topics, and you keep doubling down, tripling down, and trying to sort of make sense of this miasma, this insane sort of like, it's like a stained glass window with all the the piece is all out of order and you're trying to make it into some. So well, see, look over. It kind of makes sense if you look at this angle, and it's like seeing things in the clouds. Like it doesn't work. It's not really there, but you're trying to like piece this thing together like a puzzle in a weird way to make it fit. And to do that, it requires a lot of leaps, gymnastics, shutting off your brain, and like Father Moses said, kind of rejecting what's right in front of your face. I mean, everybody can see right here, Francis is literally in the mosque praying towards Mecca. And it should be like obvious right here that you can't do that. If you're a Christian, there's no way you would even do that. And so all of these, quote, loopholes, notice we have multiple Catholics say, well, there's loopholes to where you can do this. I mean, this is just ridiculous. This is like this, I saw this video the other day of where one of the Hasidic Jews was like, they'd invented a light switch, and the light switch, you turn the light switch because you can't work on the Sabbath, and if you were to flick a switch, that would be working on the Sabbath. And so the switch is set up to where there's a random signal that fires to shut off. So you're not actually, by removing the barrier to the electrical signal, you're not actually turning it off, but you're actually turning a switch, but you're not doing the work because you're not physically the cause of the light going off. So this is the absurd. This is literal Roman Catholic thinking, the identical levels of thinking. I saw another one where one of the rabbinical rulings was that you can walk a certain amount of steps inside on the Sabbath, but you can't go outside. And so what the Hasidic Jews in the neighborhoods of New York have done is put a string around a giant section to make it enclosed. This is outside. So like they're stringing string from light posts outside to then say that now it's enclosed because there's a string. And this is what leads to this whole idea of like, well, I can actually trick God, right? That's the mindset. That's like the rabbinical mindset of like, well, I've got these loopholes that will allow me to like skirt the issue. And it's exactly what's going on here. What do we say? What do we hear in the first hour? Well, there's a bunch of loopholes, right? So he's going and praying in the mosque towards Mecca, but he's actually privately praying for their conversion. Now, we don't actually know that, but people are saying, well, I think that's what he's up to. Okay, but you can't do this. Like, this action itself is something you can't do. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, two things with that. Number one is when I was, 18 or so, I worked at Starbucks, and we used to have these Jews that would come in, and they would be coming in on Sabbath, and they can't pay for anything, so they would put money on top. This is not a joke. They would put money on top of their head underneath the hat. And then when they came into Starbucks, they would order the drink, take the hat off, and then lean their head towards the counter so the money would fall off of the top of their head onto the counter. This is not a joke, okay? Right. Like, and I mean, at the time, you're like, you're not fooling God.
Yeah.
Like it's not like this is not a game. It's like you think about your relationship with your own children, and when you tell your children to do something, you're like, look, it's the spirit of what I'm telling you to do, not X, Y, and Z minutia, so that you can find a loophole in what I'm instructing you to do. And it's also interesting. I was talking with a really nice young Roman Catholic guy yesterday on the phone, and he was, we were talking about Roman Catholic priesthood, and he was basically saying how, it's hard to kind of relate to these priests. So then he got into, aren't you married? But aren't you married to the church, and then you're married to your wife, and then isn't that kind of like polygamy? And I'm like, buddy, you've cultivated a priesthood that's full of guys who don't want to be married and or have very peculiar desires.
Right.
You've gotten rid of all the normal, healthy males who want to have relationships with women.
And by the way, Father Moses, everybody's sort of jumping on this. Francis said something base the other day about Skittles in the seminary. However, did everybody miss the point that this actually is an admission of the critique that we're making? So basically, Francis is admitting, yeah, there's Skittles everywhere in the seminaries. That's exactly what we've been saying. And then, by the way, he walked it back within 24 hours.
he apologized for it. What's so crazy is you can say it. You can go, hey, the seminaries are full of these type of men who are interested in these type of proclivities. And everybody goes, no, you're over.
Yeah.
Like, your literal Pope just said the same thing. You don't think that he has better information?
He doesn't know. Yeah, right. Like
that he doesn't know, that he doesn't. He's got better information on. He said it's full of them. It's full of them. So what's interesting, even in that, is that you have this priesthood that is completely detached from reality, meaning that they don't have normal desires for women. They're not married. They don't have children, and yet that's going to produce the better priesthood because they're more committed. And yet, when you actually talk, like when I talk to a young Roman Catholic guy, it's like they know the things that I'm telling them pertain way more to their life because they know that I'm married, that I have a wife, that I've been where they've been, and that that they want to go in the same direction that I go in. Again, but you have to kind of turn your brain off and say, well, the celibate guy who's not interested in women is actually the higher choice for the priesthood. So I'm like, buddy, you can't get good spiritual direction from guys who don't even understand your way of life, are not even interested in it. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think that a lot of Roman Catholics even think of this as spiritual direction. I mean, I think a lot of the people that we've been interacting with in the past few days, for example, they see this as like Bayes trad political movement.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of the Twitter tradcat sphere is all about like, no, I'm here because of Pepe the Frog and Bayes trad political stuff. I mean, the first guy that came on, the guy that was here for the first hour, was basically saying, well, I got into all this stuff from like the right wing sphere.
So just in your experience, Jay, how do they reconcile that with what they actually encounter in reality?
Well, but see, that's the thing is like the idea of this as a Bayes trad right wing political movement is more important than any of this theological stuff.
So it's not even about Christ. It's not
it's about politics, being Bayes, being trad, spouting off on Twitter. That's what it's about.
Interesting.
I mean, with a lot of these people. Now, some of these people, they try to take it serious, but
yeah, that's interesting. I got to process that. When we talk about Roman Catholicism, like I don't know the system from the inside, having never been Catholic. I only know it from interacting with people who were formerly Roman Catholic or people who are actively Roman Catholic, and there just seems to be such a disconnect from reality.
So I think within Catholicism, there's a lot. It's all over the place. So you've got like Thomas Merton types that are doing Zen Buddhist meditation. You've got wannabe LARPing medieval scholastics that think that Roman Catholicism is Thomism, even though the Vatican hasn't cared about Thomism for the last 70 years. You've got, trad cats that see it as like a dogmatic list of propositions that you believe. You've got Roman Catholics obsessed with Fatima and visions and apparitions. It's all over the place. And then you've got a sizable portion of recent converts via Candace, other people online. And for them, it's Bayes trad political movement. That's all it is.
Got it. Yeah, it's funny how Protestant Catholicism is.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like it's the umbrella that kind of houses all these different people that are not even ideologically or theologically on the same page, but all underneath the umbrella of like we're all the same thing, and yet they're not. So.
Well, I mean that was the whole premise of Uniatism too, right? Uniates were told you can believe whatever you want about Palamas and all these people and energies. Just believe in and submit to the Pope. So it's always been kind of a geopolitically motivated thing.
Do you think, I know this maybe will be off topic a little bit, but do you think that, like, the way that we see, let's say, some three-letter agencies weaving their hands into what's going on in Ukraine and the EP and whatnot, do you feel that there's that same type of influence that is subtly being exerted within Roman Catholicism, or do you think that it's at the higher levels, Vatican levels, and whatever else, it's kind of, there's an enmeshed kind of deep state program where people are kind of moving or guiding the church in a certain, quote unquote, church in a certain direction that has their interests in mind?
All the above. I think that if you go back to the Gregorian reforms of the 11th century, the papacy explicitly started saying that you have to believe in their temporal supremacy. That is worldly power to be saved. If you don't believe in the worldly power of the Pope, you're not saved. That's unum sanctum, that's a couple centuries after the Gregorian reforms. But Gregorian reforms of Dictatus Papae is where it begins. That's the famous document where the Pope's basically saying that I'm the Quisatz Haderach. And then I think it develops for a long time into where we are now, to where, in the 20th century, there was a lot of deep state influence, and that's well documented by Catholics like David Wimhoff. So I think that both things are going on, where it's kind of like, it's all the above.
So do you think that, like, some of the quote-unquote more liberal streams that are happening within Catholicism are the direct byproduct of state-sponsored influence and participation, basically, in the kind of pushing of the agenda, the direction?
Oh, I think that the trad version and the lib version of Catholicism are both part of the overall agenda, and that the papacy does a constant bureaucratic two-step of what he usually does is he will do 10 steps forward, 2 steps back, and that's a classic bureaucrat move. So I don't think that I mean, I think there's a lot of traditional Catholics who legitimately oppose Francis, but I don't think at the top. I think it's really a controlled and managed geopolitical entity. Yes, it's a captured institution, is what I'd say.
When you see people who are kind of in this cultic mindset, where they've kind of had a, I hate to say it, but kind of brainwash themselves into accepting these things, especially I've heard Catholics say that, if they leave the Catholic Church, right, they are doomed to perdition. So there's, right, this kind of ultimate kind of sort of Damocles hanging over their head that they have to accept even what they don't want to accept for fear of losing eternal salvation. What do you think is the most powerful or compelling reason or argument that you've seen with people actually breaking free of Catholicism?
Well, I can remember having that exact same thought. Same thought, and what broke me out of that was, at a certain point, you realize, well, if God really does love me, and if God is the lover of mankind, as the liturgy says, then why would He want and expect me to constantly accept and submit to these, ridiculously wicked people? So, for example, there was a certain bishop at that time who, this was like 2004 or 5, somewhere in there, and there was a Roman Catholic bishop who had done something very notorious, scandalous, and it related to a lot of the PDF stuff, right? And so a discussion came up, and the question was, well, so wait a minute, do I still have to go submit to the PDF? Let's say, for the sake of argument, we've got a notorious PDF bishop, right? You know what I mean, right? PDO. Yeah. So I'm still bound. Jesus expects me to go submit to that man as the representative of Christ, and to bring my children to him, and to be catechized by them, and so forth. And many Roman Catholics were saying, yeah. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. Wow. There's no way Jesus would expect me to take my children to a notorious PDF bishop.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, cool. Well, yeah.
And I think the reason that, and I know that like many Roman Catholics say, well, we don't believe that, you shouldn't do that. But my point is that their approach to the legitimacy of the church and the sacraments and so forth, they have completely divorced morals from the sacraments, right? And so what they think is Donatism, it's not Donatism. They actually think that, like, you can be ordained as a Roman Catholic priest, and that next day you can go out and start, you can become a Satanist the very next day. You can spend the rest of your life consecrating the host to blaspheme it, and that's all still a real operation, because they actually think it's almost like a magical approach, and it's like they worship the authority to the extent that there's nothing that can remove that power and that authority even if that person, and it's getting now to the point where it's like, even if the Pope's a complete apostate, like he still is, he still has that authority. And there's a quote, I think, from Catherine of Siena in the Middle Ages. And I think it sums up this whole mindset. And it's something like, even if the Pope were to be the devil himself, I would still submit to the Pope. That's the ultimate expression of authority worship.
Now, from what I understand with that, Jay, the understanding is that in the ordination, there's actually an ontological change, right?
Right, but we wouldn't say as Orthodox that if you apostatize and you go out and start.
No.
That's the difference.
Yeah, but that's.
You there?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying is that in Catholicism, the quote unquote ontological. Because, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, you go ahead. We can hear you now.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, that's what from my understanding. Yeah, my understanding was that in Catholicism, the teaching basically that it's essentially an ontological change for the person being ordained was one of the reasons why all of the grievous misconduct that happened, they didn't actually laicize any of those priests.
Right.
Or they didn't kind of reprimand them. They just moved them around because ontologically they had been changed from a normal person, quote unquote, into a priest, and so therefore that priesthood could never be taken away from them or something along those lines.
Yeah, even if you get defrocked, you're forever a priest. You're just not, in their terminology, you would not be licit. So you're still confecting the Eucharist. You're still doing all the full functions of the priest. You're just not doing it in a licit way, but it's all still valid. That's their view.
And so that was part of the reason why they didn't take steps to reprimand those people? You think that?
That and I think there was other things going on. I think some of these people were part of networks that had powerful support. I think that some of these people, there's also, they've had at certain points a severe lack of priests to go around because people don't want to join the Roman Catholic priesthood. That's why a lot of Roman Catholic dioceses in America now, they've imported all Nigerians to be priests.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that.
No, they have a severe shortage.
Okay. And Americans don't want to do it, essentially. Is that
No, there's vocations to seminaries have plummeted since Vatican II.
Interesting.
Except in like Africa, so.
And so, forgive me, but somebody who's in Africa basically gets a full ride, gets to go to America, gets to have a quote-unquote stabilized normal life, and kind of a way out of... Yeah, okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Now, I've got some energy to keep going. We'll keep going with some of the people that are in line because some of you guys have been waiting for a while. We do have to remind you that we have a sponsor, and also I'm going to go TT to the little girls' room.
Put you on something
but this is our show sponsor.
Quick. Most of these Zoomer gym bros are consuming macro-guzzling synthetic dyes and synthetic sweeteners on the daily. They don't even know it. Goofy AF. There's nothing great about that. Do not listen any further unless you are an alpha or sigma male. This is important and there could be consequences. There's a new certified sigma male pre-workout powder for sigmas only. It is guaranteed to empower you to dominate your co-workers, fire your boss, aggressively gamble, or invade a small village. Chad Mode stands out from the crowd by excluding artificial flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, and dyes. We've even avoided so-called natural flavors, which are actually not natural at all, ensuring a clean and effective formula. Experience the pure goodness of Chad Mode, colored with organic blue spirulina extract, organic lemon, cherry, and organic maple crystals. Forget synthetic caffeine made in a sketchy Chinese lab. Embrace the natural power of organic green coffee bean extract, which will get your mind going and pump you up to the max. Chad Mode is made in America with all clean ingredients, the first clean pre-workout of its kind. Why are these people adding synthetic sweeteners to every single pre-workout when there are many studied downsides to consuming nasty fake sucralose? Each dose of Chad Mode contains the kick of a cup and a half of coffee, delivering a surge of energy alongside essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbal extracts. Chad Mode will allow you to fire your boss and dominate anyone who opposes you. Chad Mode will make you more dominant in your daily life.
Head on over to chalk.com, use promo code J44Life, that's JAY44LIFE, and get half off all those great products like the male performance stack right here. I went to the gym yesterday, but both Jamie and I did. We had a great time. I felt great after taking my Tomcat Ali and heading to the gym. Also, check out the Chad mode. Great pre-workout there. Andrea, what's up? You got to unmute, Andrea.
Hi, thank you. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just listening to the conversation with the gentleman. I think his name is Father Moses. And I just have a couple questions. So I would like to know, in the history of the Orthodox Church, how many hospitals, nursing homes, orphanages, schools has the Orthodox Church actually founded?
Yeah, have you heard of Byzantium? That's where universities come from. You familiar with that?
Byzantine?
You don't know what Byzantium is?
No, I don't know what Byzantium is.
Okay.
I'm Roman Catholic.
Right. Well, actually, the longest running empire in the history of the world is the Byzantine Empire, and it's the Orthodox Empire.
Like where Turkey is, modern day Turkey?
Okay, we're going to move on because I'm going to get mad. And I'll be mean, and I don't want to be mean and give people an excuse to say that I'm mean. Dave, what's up? You got to unmute, Dave. Edip. Edip. Or Dave, you're here? Either one.
Yeah, hi.
Uh-huh.
Well, I came here because of the word Catholic, Protestant, Muslims. Everything is in here. I don't know whether you discuss religion, theology, philosophy. I would like to have one session with you. I have written 2 translations of the Quran, many books on Islam and Christianity and atheism. And my website... Hello, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hold on, Dave. We're talking to this guy. Go ahead.
Yeah, my website is banned by Catholic Church, and to my surprise,
Hold on.
I learned that
Hold
Catholic...
on. Slow down.
Yes.
Banned by Catholic Church. You're saying you're banned by the Catholic Church?
My website, yes.
How is your website banned by the Catholic Church?
Let me tell you, I was teaching philosophy and logic for 23 years. One of my students moved to San Diego, and then one day he called me, former student. He said, I'm working on this philosophy paper. Would like to discuss with you. I said, well, I have written multiple articles on the subject. It is on my website, 19.org. I said, go check and then call me back.
Are you just here to promote your website? Because
No,
hold on.
Okay.
So hold on. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith hasn't banned books in forever. So how are they banning your website? This is
I was telling you, just have...
You're telling me a long story.
Well, he said he checked it and he said your website is banned. He was in University of San Diego.
All right, so we'll grant you that the Vatican is scared of your website. All right, so let me ask. Can I ask you a question?
Let me tell you.
No, it's not story time and website promotion time. Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead, gentlemen. You are very.
Are you Muslim?
I am peacemaker. My religion is peacemaking. I don't follow any Sunni or Shiite religions.
That's not a religion. Okay, go ahead, Dave.
What is going on here?
What's up, man?
This phone is killing me.
Speak up. We can hear you.
Oh, what is going on?
All right. Try again next time, Dave. So let's keep to the topics, guys. It's not let me promote my website. The topics are listed. And peacemaker is not a religion. Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, Jay. I have one question, actually.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of one of Kyle's videos, it says that the Catholic Church is trying to have a false union with the Orthodox Church in 2025 or 2026.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know anything about this, or no?
Yeah, they're floating the idea of having a anniversary of the Council of Nicaea meeting, and Bartholomew has said he thinks it's a good idea. Whether that will come about, we don't know, but Bartholomew has battered around the idea.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all, Jay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Now, there used to be some articles on this at the Union of Orthodox Journalists, but they got raided and arrested by the Ukrainian Secret Service and police. So I don't even know if they're going to be able to keep going. History matters. You gotta unmute History Matters.
Oh, is it me? I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. Are you calling from a tin can?
Oh, is it bad audio?
I can't hear anything, man.
Oh, my bad. Drop me down and I'll come back.
Okay. Tech Blue's been waiting for a while. What's up, man? Gotta unmute. Tech Blue, do you want to speak? You gotta unmute.
Hi, do you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so last time I wanted to ask you a question. I don't understand the notion of a second coming and the Old Testament.
Thank you. I mean, there's a lot of passages that talk about the resurrection and the general judgment. So any passage in the Old Testament that talks about the resurrection, the general judgment, would be, for us, a second coming passage. Also, any of the passages that talk about, the fullness of the messianic promise in the sense of Christ, reigning with his saints, new heavens, new earth, right? Isaiah talks about that, new heavens, new earth being, those are all for us. In latter Isaiah, those are all for us, second coming passages.
But for example, there's many Jews that says that these passages are about David or are not messianic prophecies, like Isaiah 53 or Psalm 110.
Yeah, but wait, they're not messianic prophecies, or they are? What'd you say?
Like the suffering servant is about Israel, and the Psalms in general are about
but all of those passages like Isaiah 51, 52, 53 also contain messianic prophecies. They also call a few chapters earlier in 49, it calls the Messiah divine and that he's worshipped by these Gentiles. So if you read it in the context, not just singling out the suffering servant passage, but if you look at all the prior passages from 49 up to 55, like you get a totality picture that it's not just talking about the nation of Israel. It's talking about the nation of Israel exemplified in the person of the Messiah.
Can I give you an example of what I've read?
I know the Jewish argument that they think it's just the nation of Israel suffering. Sure.
No, but the passages is about the kings, the future kings, seeing Israel suffering and then reflecting on themselves. Right.
And believing in the Messiah, like Isaiah 49 says.
Okay, all right. I have another question. Did Jesus fulfill all the prophecies? Because there's some that says that he died before realizing any of them, but I don't understand really much if he did or not.
I think he fulfilled them all. I've never heard of him dying before realizing them. What does that mean?
Because they said that there's no second coming. Then when he first died, he didn't accomplish the prophecies, like bringing all Jews back to Israel, gathering.
Yeah, but if you look at the way the book of Acts explains those passages, the bringing back of the remnant is what happens in Acts 2. So that is fulfilled in Acts 2. That's the rebuilding of the fallen tabernacle of David. That's why the passage in Acts 2 cites that prophecy from David's Psalms. Furthermore, the Psalms constantly talk about, even the Messianic Psalms, talk about the Messiah undergoing this death and this descent to Hades and his resurrection. So what would all these Messianic passages be talking about when it talks about the descent into Hades?
Okay.
I mean, there's like probably 20 of them, 30 of them.
Yeah, but one last question is about the priesthood. Multiple times you say that the rabbinical Jews don't have a priesthood, and
well, a rabbi's not a Levitical priest, right?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Use the example of I think the verse that says you're a priest forever by the order of Melchizedek, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I've heard another argument that Melchizedek was an other. How can I say that? It wasn't in the first books. Like it was added later, because Melchizedek means rightful king. So when they say that, it's talking about David. Like it says you are going to be a priest forever, like a rightful king.
I mean, the other Psalms talk about Melchizedek, or talks about Jerusalem being Salem. So you understand, Melchizedek is in Genesis. It's not invented for David.
Yeah, but their argument is that there was conflict between multiple tribes of priests, and then when the Babylonian conquered Israel, the kings of the north come to the south, and they wanted to, and the priest and the south wanted to legitimize.
So, okay, I understand what you're saying, but you don't understand that it's a both and. Like Psalm 110 is not just about David; it's about the Messiah. You don't think it's a messianic prophecy?
I don't read it that way, but I can do more research.
Do you think Daniel 7 is a messianic prophecy? Do you think Rashi is correct? He says it is.
The Son of Man?
Yeah.
This one is more tricky. Like for real, I don't really know.
It's tricky when it's okay. But isn't it not tricky when there's all these theophanies in the Old Testament? Who do you think the theophanies are in Genesis, like we covered last night for like 2 hours? Who is that?
I wasn't there last night, but
okay. Well, I mean, they're like just for like this, so just say for the sake of argument, the 30 or so theophanies in the Book of Genesis.
I think it's metaphorical.
So hold on. So you can worship a metaphor?
No. You're talking about the angel of the Lord. Okay. So I think it's how can I say that?
So like let me give an example.
It's not the angel that you worship. It's not the angel that you worship. It's divine agency. Like God gave the authority to the angel.
Okay, so was God in the burning bush, or was it an angel, or was it just quote God's agency? Is God's agency God or not? Who's the agent? Who's the agent?
It's the angel.
Oh, so now created beings can be called Yahweh? Can you worship angels?
I mean, it's
so like this is what you have to do to get out of this, you see?
But it's like a king sending an envoy.
Well, but why does she say, she doesn't say I saw the representative, I saw God himself. It says that God appeared to Abraham at the oak of Mamre. And you're saying, well, it's not God, it's an agent of God. But then the agent is identified multiple times in Genesis as Jehovah and Yahweh.
Yeah, but when in Exodus, he said, God said that he put his name and the angel, right?
Yeah, that's because it's Jesus. That's who has the name.
There's another example when there's another angel that has the name of the Lord, Yahweh.
Well, you're just assuming that that's not the same figure in the Book of Genesis. So you're assuming that it's another angel. We're saying it's the exact same angel because the same angel that spoke out of the bush, identifying itself as I am. How can an angel say I am when an angel's not I am?
Because that's the way God talks to humans.
Exactly. So it's God talking and not an angel. Can an angel Can an angel redeem or forgive sins?
By God's authority, yes.
Oh, so angels are now redeemed. So created things redeem and forgive sins.
No, but just like
well, you said no, but now they do. So this is what you have to go to. This is the games you got to play to not accept the fact that clearly the angel is called the Redeemer. In fact, if you read at the end of Genesis, when Jacob talks about his life story, he says that his Redeemer is the angel who accompanied him through all of his struggles. And the Redeemer is the one that, it's the same angel, Redeemer, and angel of the presence. Angel just means messenger. It doesn't necessarily mean a created messenger. Because all these passages that you said earlier, well, it's God, but it's an angel speaking for God, but it's called God, but it has the name of God. So doesn't the Bible tell us then that no one sees the Father at any time?
Yes, but
okay. So who's the form of God that's appearing in Ezekiel 1-10? Is it?
I don't.
Okay, so in Ezekiel 1-10, there's one riding on the chariot like a son of man, who is the face and glory of God. What's staring you in the face is that it's Jesus.
Okay. So yeah, you responded to all my question. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, good conversation. Yeah, if you look at, we did a whole whole chat on Ezekiel 1-10 just on that. Because when he sees the chariot, which is the cherubim chariot, he sees that one that rides the chariot is one like a son of man, who is the face and glory of God. Above the firmament there was a sapphire stone, also from the appearance of his waist, the color of amber, like the appearance of a rainbow. And so was the appearance of the brightness. It was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of God. Now, God doesn't give his glory to another. So how are we going to say that this is a created being, an angel that's manifesting, that's riding the angel chariot? No, Jesus, only God could ride the chariot of the gods, right? And this is a big chariot that's being spoken of here. And the one riding the chariot is identified as the one who is the likeness of God's glory. And it's the same thing that you just said was a tricky one in Daniel 7. One like a son of man. And so if you read Ezekiel 1 to Ezekiel 10, the descriptors are the same. I'm going over here to 10. Maybe it's 11. By the way, immediately after this passage, I forgot to the Holy Spirit. Well, the Holy Spirit's present throughout the Ezekiel 1-10 narrative as well, but it's escaping me which one is a specific passage. Let me just pull it up in here. I've got Ezekiel open. I got too many tabs open here. Or maybe the Ezekiel passage is the one that's... No, it's 2:1. Excuse me. That's why I couldn't find it. No, that's him saying... It's, let's see, maybe it says Son of God, one like a Son of God. What's the passage? There's a passage in Ezekiel where he says that the rider on the chariot had the appearance of the glory of the... Okay, so 8 says the glory. The Lord, the glory, and the Spirit. The glory of the Lord in 10. The voice of the Lord speaks from the glory there. One like Son of Man. I know that Son of Man is mentioned here. I'm just trying to find that passage. Does anybody in the chat have that reference handy? Is it 10? So he sees the firmament and the stones. And he says, I saw the man clothed with a robe go between the wheels of the cherubim. Then he sees the glory of the Lord, the Lord's glory. The glory of the Lord, the cherubim. Okay, so I don't see it in the Orthodox Study Bible. Spirit of the Lord in 11. There is a passage that says one like the Son of Man. It might be in the Masoretic, is why I'm not seeing it in my Bible. Let's see. Let's see. One says appearance of a man who is the likeness of the glory. No, we're talking about the one in Ezekiel, not the one in Daniel. I know what Daniel says. I'm looking for this passage specifically in Ezekiel 1 through 10. I've lost the Bible. Here we go. So 24, it says the throne. A voice came from above the firmament. There was over their heads the likeness of a throne. On the likeness of the throne was the appearance of a man. Okay, so maybe that's what I'm thinking of, that some of them call it Son of Man. From the appearance of his waist was amber, fire, etc. So we think this is the Logos, pre-incarnate. And then it calls him the likeness of the glory. And it does parallel the one like a Son of Man in Daniel. But here, somewhere, there's a passage that says something to that effect, I'm pretty sure. So let's see, maybe let's try 8. Because it comes up a lot in these first 11 chapters. So let's see. The hand of the Lord God fell upon me, and I looked, and there was a likeness, fire from his waist down. So this is the same figure in the earlier chapters. He stretched out the form of a hand, and he took me by the lock of the hair, and the Holy Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven. And behold, the glory of God was there, like the vision that I saw in the plain. And he said to me, Son of man, lift up your eyes. What do you see? He sees, so this is the Lord doing this, right? And the Spirit is there. And then 10 says, I looked, and there in the firmament above the cherubim there appeared something like a sapphire stone. And then he spoke to the man clothed with linen. So this is the appearance of a man. Go in among the wheels and fill your hands with coal and fire from among the cherubim and scatter it on the city. Then the glory of the Lord went up from the cherubim, paused over the threshold. And the house of the Lord was filled with the cloud. This is the glory cloud, the brightness of the glory. So here is Father, Son, Spirit. So then this is the wheels of the chariot, the cherub. Then the glory of the Lord departed from the threshold of the temple and stood over the cherubim. And the glory of God was above them. I bet you this is, by the way, where the Muslims, when they get that perverted, stupid thing in the Quran that the Salafis follow, that he's above the throne. I guarantee you it's like a perversion of these Ezekiel texts, isn't it? Okay. Anyway, well, maybe I'm just thinking of Daniel and thinking of the fact that it called him one like a man. But I could have sworn some of the translations said. If they do and I find it later, I'll put it up here. Maybe it's like the King James that says one like a man or something, one like son of man. Let's see, we got a super chat from Cholo Mexicano, $5. I missed the ecumenist, anti-ecumenism stance. Too many people are soft on these positions, just like people are soft on Skittle stuff. Orthodox and orthosexuals have better things to do. May Mexico become Orthodox one day. Dwacha. Thank you, Cholo. Well, Emmanuel, $5. Thank you for starting this Trinity series. Thank you. Appreciate that. Well, Emmanuel. Food for Stephen Hawkeyes, $1. Fundamental method of pedagogy is to not compromise on matters of truth and dogma. Roman Catholics play stupid like they don't know that a pope can't pray in a mosque. Would any Roman Catholic agree to call their libtard family a member? Well, you could point out that when they do the tu quoque, because every time you bring this up, they'll do a tu quoque where they'll say, well, but you guys do the same stuff. Oh, so you're admitting that it's wrong, and you're correct that there are Orthodox bishops that do this, and it's also wrong and apostasy and heresy. I agree. But by the fact that you're admitting that it's Orthodox doing the same sin, you're admitting that it's wrong. So that means that you can't have loopholes, you see. So that cuts two ways. History, did you want to try again?
Hello, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, what's up, Jam? Long time listener, but, I'm actually just curious, and I know I'm positive you've talked about it, but I've had some difficulty actually finding any discussions you've had about it. What your perspective is on not specifically Melkites as a part of the Catholic Church. I'm under the assumption that you believe it's a theologically schizophrenic position. Am I correct in that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I understand that part of it, but I was actually curious about like your perspective on pragmatic intercommunion under subjugation of other, like in the Middle East, for example, where the Melkites are from. There's a long history of historic intercommunion from a pragmatic perspective, not from any ecumenical perspective. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm trying to kind of say.
I mean, we did an interview with a guy a few years ago who had left the Melkites. So you might look up J. Dyer, what was the name of that? Trying to think of the name of the. Let me find it. Former Union, is that what we called it? It's me and Lewis, and the guy was in the Melkite seminary. But we got into a lot of these issues and details, and he knew all the history of Melkite stuff. So, but I gotta find that video.
Yeah, and just one more thing. I'm sorry, man, if you're in the middle of something, but I do think it's a little interesting, and I'd like to hear you expound on this a little bit. Everyone kind of thinks it's views the Melkites as an opportunity for, or at least in the Roman Catholic Church, as an opportunity for
further union between Orthodox and Roman Catholic, but I kind of actually view it as because of the awkward position that the Melkites are in, they are closer to being reunified with Orthodoxy than ever bridging the gap between Orthodoxy and Rome. What do you think of that?
I don't know the internal status of all that. I mean, closest thing I would have is this. I found the podcast I was looking for. It's called "From Catholic to Orthodox: How Eastern Catholics Are a Death Blow to Papism," and that guy was in the Uniate Seminary, I'm pretty sure. So you could check that out and see what he says. I'm probably gonna head out pretty soon. I'll do one more inverse. I'm getting kind of tired. Go ahead, inverse. You gotta unmute, man.
Hi, Jay. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So I officially converted on last Holy Saturday, and and then following that, I went on kind of a big trip to multiple countries, and recently, so I guess 2 Saturdays ago, I was in a Russian church in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, and I unfortunately missed communion because confession was done midway through Divine Liturgy. So I was wondering, as a RoCore, if you could explain that and why that tradition stands.
I don't know. I mean, typically, I think they just kind of give the option that it's early. You're supposed to do it the Saturday before, or you do it in the morning early, or the priest gives kind of a last chance to do it right before communion, I guess, because some Russian people can't get there on time. I don't know. Father Moses maybe could speak to this better than me. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I'll let him answer if he's able to.
Is he in the space? Or?
Yeah, he's. Father Moses, are you able to answer that? I'm not actually sure where the Father Deacon Ananias. Are you able to? I don't know where that tradition comes from. Why they do that way. I know that. Go ahead.
Sorry, what was the specific question on that, Jay?
Why is it that sometimes in the Russian circles of the Russian sphere, the church will offer a confession kind of right before communion or at the beginning of the service?
Oh, just practicalities, because we have to hear so many confessions. So there's a couple different ways that it's done. Like in a bigger monastery or church where you have multiple priests, sometimes what will happen is there'll be one priest who's actually designated to hear the confessions all during the liturgy. And he'll actually be out of the altar basically hearing confessions all the way until basically the great entrance. There's also a tradition within the church where after the priest receives Holy Communion, he'll actually come out and give a homily. So instead of giving a homily after the gospel, they'll actually give a homily later on after they've received Holy Communion, before the faithful receive Holy Communion, in which case, if the main celebrant comes out to give the homily, sometimes the secondary priest will go over to the confessional and basically pick up any stragglers that weren't there at the beginning of the liturgy. So this has more to do with larger parishes, especially in cities where people are traveling and also taking public transportation in the morning to get to services where, there can be all kinds of things that happen that delay your entrance to getting church and whatnot. Originally in the church, the actual historical stance of the church was if you were not there by the time of the reading of the gospel, you could not receive Holy Communion.
Right.
That is practiced in my own parish.
That's what I've heard. I've always told that.
Yeah, I think that one of the reasons it became more lax was that because grandparents a lot of times were taking grandchildren to the liturgy, and so they would have more difficulty getting them there on time, and or parents, and or in big cities where there's just so many people, and a lot of times people wouldn't be able to get there the night before to hear holy or to go to confession. So again, these things should always be viewed as abnormalities, and they are, in the true sense of the word, an economia based on factors such as the size of the parish, people traveling, the city, and other things. They shouldn't become the default. I've been at places where that sort of stuff actually becomes the norm, but there's no reason for it. You know, it doesn't bolster the faith of the community or make for a strong congregation. It actually turns everything very lax and loosey-goosey, and that's not healthy or normal.
Thank you. For the people that were out, here's the talk that I did too on Ezekiel 1-10. So if you want to go deeper into the Ezekiel passages, we did a whole podcast on that probably 3 or 4 years ago. All right, I'm pretty tired, and we're gonna go hang out and do stuff, Jamie and I. So thank you guys for joining me, and I want to remind everybody to head on over to the Eventbrite link. Head over to this Eventbrite link right here and get tickets to our June 22nd event with Jim Bob and Isaac Weishaupt and Jamie, my wife. We're gonna have a lot of fun. It's not too late. Be sure and get your tickets right there. June 22nd. It's a 6-hour epic event, and there's the link to get that. You can also, if you're watching this later, the link is in the show description. It's also on my Twitter. And let's see. No edit, quest $3. Pope Francis' statements are a good rebuttal to the intention argument. In other words, like we don't know if the Pope's intention for praying in the mosque maybe is to convert people. No, it's not. The Pope says, quote, "It is not listed to convince them of your faith. Proselytism is the strongest venom against the path of ecumenism." Should you convince people to become Catholic? No, says Pope Francis. Those are quotes from Francis. Exactly. Thank you, Noetic Quest. Ricky, $3. Mr. Clean, that guy was convinced that we are indoctrinated into he is correct that we are indoctrinated into prioritizing the triune God. Exactly. Biscuit Head, $10. Thank you for all that you do. You help me and my family become catechumens at the parish. Can you explain how tag is different from the fallacy from the consequent? We did a whole podcast on that with Father Deacon Ananias. I think it was one of our first or second podcasts. So we're kind of coming to the end of the stream here. So, but most of these questions, I know it's difficult to find because there's like a mass of material. So when people are like, answer this, and it's like, well, we did a podcast on that 4 years ago. It's like, well, but you can't find. Yeah, no, you can blame the way the algo works here because it's really hard to find these things. Oh, wait, I think it might have been covered in my stream. I know it is. It's my stream, bad arguments against tag. What did I title that? See, then it becomes a game of me trying to remember what I named the streams 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Arguments against tag. Yeah. Okay, so it's either this one or the other one where I'm arguing against the objections. Objections to tag. Objections. I think it's called objections. Aha. So I remember one of them was me and FDA. No, there's another one where I'm sitting in my old apartment. And I can't remember what I named it. Dang it. A lot of these would be relevant to it, even though they're not specifically addressing that question. Okay, it's this stream, but this is a clip from that stream. This isn't the actual stream. Here it is. It's this one. God's existence and transcendental arguments. So this is the first stream that I did addressing objections. So there's that one. And then there's another stream that we did addressing objections here.
Etc. Now he's going to talk about strict monotheism.
I got so many tabs open that it's like the whole computer's frozen.
Something with it.
And then I'm pretty sure we addressed affirmative consequent with FDA here. So if you don't see it in these three, message me again.
We don't accept it.
Because, anyway. Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Let's see. I think we have... Do we have more? I think we have more super chats. Let's see. I know this is low tier, $3. How is Jesus fully man if he wasn't conceived by an intercourse? Well, he's fully man because he possesses a fully human nature that he derived from his mother. So when we say man, we mean human nature. He's not a human person, and so this presupposes the distinction between nature and person. He's a divine person or subject because he's the second person of the Godhead incarnate. And so the only subject or agent there is the divine agency or the divine agent or subject of the Logos. So the human nature that he assumed is body, mind, soul, and will, but not a human person. Wouldn't this make him half man and half God? No, he's 100% man and 100% God. I know this is low tier at $3. Easiest, best church father work to start with. I would start with On the Incarnation by Athanasius, and then I would read the theological orations of Gregory Nazianzus, and then I would move into other Cappadocians. Craig Poiret, $10. Jay is living in a swamp like Shrek. Yeah, actually, the swamp is literally right next door. I do feel like Shrek. Here's a tip for the allergy fund. Thank you. Yes, that goes towards Manuka honey. Delivery guide, $1. Are angels energies? No, angels are created beings that also have an angelic nature and an angelic personhood. So they're angelic beings or persons like Michael or Gabriel, and they have a created energy proper to angelic nature. Humans have a created energy proper to human nature. God has an energy proper to divine nature. In midcap, $3. What do you think about St. Nikolai Velimirovich and ecumenism? He later repented of those things, is my understanding. Mindhack, $1. When is your next book? I'm trying to work on it. It's just so much stuff is going. It's hard to find time to write. So I hope by the end of this year I can finish it. Milo, $5. I got about 100, 150 pages. Milo, $5. I was born into Orthodoxy. I'm trying to learn more. One thing that bothered me is what happens with good people born into sects. I know you've spoken about this. Could you clarify more? Do you mean why would God allow people to be born into those things? We don't ultimately know all of God's unfathomable, knowledge and decisions for why he does what providentially. We know if we read the book of Job that basically what we come away with is that God has a sufficient reason for why we have those kinds of questions and issues, but God doesn't have to tell us. And also through the dialogue of Job, we get the impression that God couldn't even explain it to us, right? Like why it's that way. Because we're finite, he's infinite and so forth. That's kind of the point at the end of the book of Job. Jay Zuna, $15. Since a Protestant can't justify the biblical canon, is it safe to say that whatever they interpret from the Bible lacks foundational truth? Like a broken clock is correct twice a day analogy. I don't know if I would say that they lack foundational truth. I would just say that it's inconsistent. Like the position is like, it's like two conflicting positions at the same time. So anything that they say that's true is true and has foundation. But they've also got this other belief and position that's inconsistent with that, which is like, all the Protestant, autonomous, I don't need a church, I just automatically know the canon ideas. And I think that that's key to Roman Catholicism too, because a lot of times when we bring these topics up, when we point out a contradiction in Roman Catholic documents, many Roman Catholics will run to some place where, here's where a passage where it says the Old Testament teaches the Trinity. And they're missing the point that we're not saying that your tradition doesn't have a lot of true statements. we're saying that there's these conflicting statements that don't make sense, right? If the Old Testament teaches the Trinity, and if the Old Testament saints believe and worship the Trinity, that's inconsistent with the other proposition in Vatican II's Lumen Gentium 16 and Nostra Aetate, that Muslims and Jews all worship the same generic God that's not Trinitarian. So you see, it's like there's conflicting things. That's the point. Not do they say a lot of true things, you see. But they'll often run to, well, here's a quote over here where it says what you're saying.